arrested for the stabbings, and warnings of a forest fire of virus infections in the US with cases spiking in Florida and California. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
Plus, crisis for Lufthansa. Europe's biggest airline threatened with collapse as its €9 billion bailout hangs in the balance. And Germany's troubled Wirecard says its missing billions probably never existed.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahij. Good morning, everyone. It is 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And we still sit here and assess the prospect of second wave fears in markets, Roger. And, you know, that might have been one of the reasons in terms of, well, it was also the protest that President Trump's sort of campaign team gave for the poor attendance at the Tulsa rally. But it really was quite stunning, and also adding to a week of warnings for President Trump's campaign.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And also, of course, the latest revelations coming, of course, from the Bolton book, which I think is transfixing Washington at the moment. But it's still a long way to go to the actual election.
Absolutely. At the same time, you had President Trump talking about the silent majority being stronger than ever before, but it does certainly raise some question marks over whether it's a done deal for him in the run-up to the election. And as you say, adding to uncertainties overall. In terms of uncertainties for the markets, it's interesting because even with those second wave fears, we saw equities gain on the week globally last week. But then you also had treasuries gain and the dollar and the yen gain. So you had equities and safe haven assets gain, which gives a little bit of a split picture in terms of what investors see from here. JP Morgan saying that when it comes to risk assets, you've really got to be a lot more selective overall as you go into the second half, because I paraphrase, liquidity has been papering over a lot of the cracks in terms of returns.
Yeah, and turning our focus to the UK, because it's going to be a big week here in terms of the economy, in the sense of easing the lockdown. All kinds of potentials going to be put in the mix, including reducing 2 meters distance to 1 meters distance. That's almost, it seems to me, a done deal. But the announcement's coming tomorrow, and the actual action will take place in July, when we also might learn, it's being said in the papers over the weekend, of a VAT emergency cut.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, that's one of the options for the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, as we go into the rest of the year. We also had an op-ed by the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, on the Bloomberg this morning, Roger, which we'll discuss more throughout the hour. Bailey wanting to shrink the balance sheet before rate hikes. Some question marks over whether money market funds will be examined after some vulnerabilities.
Yeah, a sense there that this is going to be a major look at really how to run things in what is basically uncharted territory for all the central banks, but Bank of England clearly taking this head on and trying to address it.
Absolutely. But in terms of uncharted territory, he didn't mention negative yields or yield curve control in that op-ed. There's a great story on the Bloomberg saying that a buy everything rally beckons in the world of yield curve control. We'll be talking to James Athey of Aberdeen Standard Investments later in the hour, who's quoted in that story. And it's interesting because he points to the fact that it could look different depending on what part of the yield curve central banks decide to target. Now, let's get to the markets, because we're 4 minutes into the equity market open. We saw gains in European equities on Friday, largely with the discussions beginning around the EU Recovery Fund, but we're having a down day today, perhaps playing a bit of catch-up to the weakness that we saw in the US on Friday on second wave fears. The Stock 600 down more than 0.9%. Taking a look across regional equity benchmarks, the FTSE 100 is down by about that amount. The CAC 40 down 1.25 percentage point. The DAX down more than 1%. There are two German companies we'll be talking about extensively this hour, Wirecard and Lufthansa. IBEX down more than 1%. FTSE MIB down more than 1%. And the US futures taking a slightly positive tone. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all higher by at least 0.3%. The 10-year Treasury yield is steady, just below a 70 handle. The 10-year Bund yield goes nowhere, negative 41. 10-year gilt yield also treading water at 24 basis points. In FX, you're seeing broadly some dollar weakness against G10. The yen is the only G10 currency slightly weakening against the dollar, so that's interesting. interesting because it suggests a bit of a risk-on tone in FX, particularly as the Aussie is outperforming. It was actually weaker at one point in the Asian session on the news that Victoria State was tightening some restrictions in Australia, but firmly in the green now, along with other commodity currencies. Speaking of commodities, oil had a great week last week, back to a weekly rally. WTI off 0.5%, 39.53. Brent at 42.28, up 0.2%. Roger, a bit of divergence there.
Right, OK, well, let's have a look at what stocks are to watch this morning. And frankly, there are two major stocks that almost everyone is watching. Bloomberg's Morwenna Coniam joins me down the line from Dublin. The first of those, of course, is Wirecard, isn't it?
Good morning. Yes, so Wirecard, after a very tumultuous week last week, has now said that the missing 1.9 billion euros of cash that they lost from their balance sheet probably doesn't exist. And so they've withdrawn their latest set of financial results. So for both fiscal 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. They are now considering a full-scale restructuring as they bid to survive. They said that previous descriptions of business of third parties which process transactions on their payment platform were not correct. So this really is more bad news for Wirecard. Their shares fell 90% last week, and this morning not looking any better, down 49%, and they've actually halted trading now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Lufthansa, of course, is the other one, isn't it, Morwenna? Bracing for a portentous week. I mean, even the threat of collapse.
Yeah, so Lufthansa also having a tough time at the moment with the global airline industry. Their biggest investor, billionaire Heinz Hermann Thiel, is threatening to block a €9 billion bailout that was coming from the German government. He feels that the bailout would dilute his holding and influence. So there's a virtual shareholder meeting upcoming on Thursday where that's expected to happen. We think he's going to make his case to the Lufthansa chief executive officer and two German ministers in an online meeting this morning, according to people familiar with the situation. If there isn't a breakthrough on this issue, they will probably go to investor vote with their future on the line. They do face the threat of insolvency there. So shares down 6.1% at the moment compared to the DAX, which is just down 1.2%.
Yeah, we're going to watch those shares extremely carefully. Thanks so much, Morwenna Coniam there, joining us down the line from Dublin with two German companies, Naira, that really do look shaky.
Absolutely, and we will have much more on both those two companies later in the hour as well. Now, to get back to our top stories, this week Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the government will set out more details on plans to reduce lockdown restrictions for the beginning of July. Bloomberg's Charles Capel reports.
The country's coronavirus alert level was reduced from 4 to 3 last week, indicating virus transmission is no longer rising exponentially, but COVID-19 is still in general circulation. Hancock also said a decision will come on whether the 2-metre social distancing requirement could be cut to 1 metre. The move could be accompanied by requirements to wear masks or more use of perspex screens in shops. The cut would also allow more businesses to open and more people to be in one place at a time, and please those highly concerned about the economic impact of the lockdown. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
At the same time, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, is preparing to announce more stimulus measures next month, potentially including an emergency cut to VAT. That's according to the Sunday Times. The report said Sunak had asked officials to prepare various options to lower the sales tax, including reducing the headline rate and zero rating more products for a fixed term. He could make the announcement in a speech which is scheduled for early July.
And a major shift for the Bank of England as well, as we were saying earlier, Roger. Governor Andrew Bailey is stressing the need to reduce the balance sheet before hiking rates. Writing for Bloomberg Opinion, Bailey says such a plan would give officials more firepower in future crises. The balance sheet has already grown to almost £700 billion and is set to get much larger due to the bank's bond buying programme. We'll discuss this with our guests later this hour, and you can also find the story on the Bloomberg.
Indeed, and we'll also have much more on UK politics on Bloomberg Westminster at 12 noon UK time. Today we're going to be speaking to the Labour MP Afsana Begum. We'll also get to the latest on the virus with one of the government's leading scientist critics, a man whose sayings in the past on all this have certainly made a lot of headlines. He's the Professor of Medicine at Buckingham University, Carol Sikora. We'll get his take on where the government stands now in terms of its response. You can catch all that live on London DAB, or you can download the podcast on Apple Music or your preferred radio app later.
Now, China is moving quickly to implement a national security law that will enable Beijing to override Hong Kong's independent legal system. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
This could happen as soon as next week. Xinhua said the central government would only have jurisdiction over a small number of cases, but critics are clearly concerned it will go much further. China will establish a new bureau in Hong Kong to analyze security and collect intelligence. The chief executive will oversee a new committee to protect national security, and she'll appoint judges to handle the cases. The Bar Association expressed alarm. It said, well, that's like picking a judge for a contest in which you have an interest. The NPC Standing Committee meets again June 28th in Beijing. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And today, European Union leaders are going to hold talks with the leadership of China. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, and the European Council President, Charles Michel, will hold video conferences with the Chinese Premier, Li Keqiang, and also with President Xi Jinping. According to officials, the EU side won't hold back in airing its opposition to China's plan to curb Hong Kong's autonomy, but they'll also want to discuss allegations that China spread disinformation about the virus outbreak.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira, and thank you. Let's start in the UK, where tributes have been paid to a history teacher, James Furlong, who was among 3 people killed in an act of terrorism in Reading on Saturday. A minute's silence will be held this morning for those victims. A 25-year-old Libyan refugee has been arrested. The head of counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu, wants the public to remain vigilant.
There is no specific intelligence to suggest that anyone attending crowded places is at risk. But I would ask the public, please continue in your daily lives, but be alert, not alarmed when you are out in public. If you see anything suspicious, then please report it.
Now over to the US. Disappointing crowds for President Donald Trump's first campaign rally since the coronavirus outbreak. The event in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, attracted far fewer supporters than the White House had touted. It was overshadowed by continuing criticism of the president's response to the pandemic and his reaction to protests about police brutality.
You are warriors. Thank you. We had some very bad people outside. We had some very bad people outside. They were doing bad things. I stand before you today to declare the silent majority is stronger than ever before.
California's new cases of coronavirus rose by a record this weekend. It's adding to fears that there is a second wave in some parts of the U.S. The World Health Organization says the Americas region now accounts for 63% of new cases. That's led by Brazil, which reported over 54,000 new infections yesterday. And elsewhere, Australia's second most populous state has tightened coronavirus controls. Bloomberg's Jason Scott says this comes as a spike triggers fears of a second wave.
Victoria extended a state of emergency by 4 weeks to July 20, halved the number of visitors allowed in homes to 5, and delayed a planned increase in the size of gatherings in cafes, restaurants and pubs. Victoria State has recorded 116 cases in the past week. 87 of those were associated with community transmission, mostly in Melbourne. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon N.A. Member FDIC.
Hi, I'm Bill Hageman, Withum's proud managing partner and CEO. We recognize this disruptive time is unsettling. For the past 45 years, Witham has been committed to helping our clients, our people, and our communities to be in a position of strength with innovative business advisory, tax, and assurance solutions. If you need guidance on business interruption and continuity issues or remote workplace solutions, please visit our website at witham.com. Together, we can get through these challenging times.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Rishad Salamat.
Sheila Patel, Chairman of Goldman Sachs Asset Management, joining us now from Wellington. Hasn't it baffled you that, you've seen these rallies, sometimes at all-time highs for these equity markets, at the same time that we've got a global pandemic, got civil unrest, mass unemployment, a recession, some would argue even a depression here. Hasn't it left you scratching your head?
I think it's both a head scratcher and then there's some underlying trends that do explain a bit of what's gone on. If you look at the real, move in the markets we had several weeks ago and how most large global institutions came into that market, really many had raised cash at the end of last year. There were expectations of a recession, although certainly not for this reason. And so many people were conservatively positioned. When you got a really extreme decline in the markets, therefore, they saw an opportunity and they looked back at their experience in 08-09 and said, I see it again. I would like to buy equities, just straight out, increase my position, use some of the cash, not all of it. As we continue to see the rally extend and we see these fits and starts, you have a lot more participants than in those early days. We expect more volatility, so I wouldn't go all eggs in one basket, but those are some of the reasonings.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we are seeing European stock markets in the red with the CAC 40 leading declines down 1.2%, the DAX slipping 1% in Frankfurt, and the FTSE down 0.8% with the Stock 600 slipping 0.9% this morning. US futures are in the green, and it all is fairly representative of what was going on in Asian markets prior to the close there. The Hang Seng is still trading at down 0.7%, but otherwise it was a fairly mixed bag with markets really looking for direction. The Hang Seng slipping, of course, on the news that Beijing confirmed its new security legislation will give it authority to override Hong Kong's legal system. So what does this all mean for the currency markets? Well, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is actually flat this morning. The yen holding at 106.9. We're seeing sterling slightly bid, up 0.3 at 123. The euro at 112 this morning. We are seeing the offshore yuan holding at 7.07 after the PBOC left its loan prime rate unchanged. The Korean won slipping 0.5% after trade data showed exports declined in June, albeit less than expected. Aussie and Kiwi dollars bid amid a drop in virus cases in Beijing. Now, the 10-year Treasury yield is slightly lower now at 69 basis points. We're seeing the 10-year bund yield down a basis point at negative 42. 10-year gilt yields slipping 2 basis points to 22 basis points. WTI is standing pat at $39 a barrel, and we're seeing gold bid at $1,747 a troy ounce amid some concerns over a second virus wave. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Dan Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Italy is looking at widening its budget deficit in the wake of coronavirus. The government plans to focus on infrastructure projects such as high-speed rail. It may approve a cut to VAT to stem the pandemic's impact on the economy. The news comes as Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is drawing up an ambitious reform plan to lobby the European Union for financial help. Now, in been a surge in cases of coronavirus, with new cases reported in hospitals, care homes, refugee centres and following religious gatherings. The infection rate, known as the R number, has risen to 2.88, meaning each person with the virus is passing it on to almost 3 others. The country's death rate has so far been relatively low at fewer than 9,000. And a demonstration in The Hague against actions by the Dutch government to rein in the coronavirus have turned violent. Yesterday, police arrested 400 protesters, according to the Associated Press. Authorities said dozens of football fans arrived at the peaceful protest and then began to clash with riot police. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now back to one of our top stories this morning. The scandal deepens at Wirecard. $2.1 billion had gone missing from the payment firm's balance sheet. Now Wirecard says the cash probably didn't exist. It's the latest in a dramatic fall from grace for a company once considered the future of German fintech. For more on the story, let's bring in Bloomberg reporter Danny Berger. Danny, it's an absolutely riveting and eye-popping story, quite frankly. Thank you for joining us. What details did we learn from Wirecard's statement today? What exactly is going on?
Well, the scandal certainly gets more complicated from what we heard last week when auditors weren't able to locate about 2 billion euros of cash that supposedly should have been on Wirecard's balance sheet. So this morning, early this morning, Wirecard releases a statement saying that now the prevailing likelihood is that that amount just doesn't exist at all. It's certainly a bizarre term. Now, the payments firm previously assumes that those amounts resided with 2 banks in the Philippines, which subsequently released a statement saying that they denied having any business relationships with Wirecard to begin with. And now they're having to reassess their business with third parties in general, withdrawing their financial statements last year and the most recent one as well. And because it hasn't released those statements, essentially they're now on $2 billion worth of financing might have to be recalled.
And Danny, I mean, we're just seeing actually the shares dropped 42% right now. But more fallout for the former CEO, Marcus Brun, because he stood down, obviously. What's the latest?
Right. So his resignation has been part of the fallout in general, along with Moody's cutting Wirecard's ratings about 6 levels. But Brown held a large portion of Wirecard, about 7% of the company, and he funded that purchase partially through a margin loan, about 150 million euros. And this is a typical way of financing for more wealthy clients. Basically, he gets this loan and he puts up the shares as collateral. But with this huge plunge in the shares, it triggers what's called a margin call. He has to now liquidate the shares, according to people familiar, in order to fund that. It's unclear who's on the other side. At the moment, Deutsche Bank originally provided the loan, but according to people familiar, has since gotten rid of it.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary how all this has evolved and how a company could go from national pride to national embarrassment. We'll continue to follow this, no doubt, in the days to come. Danny, another German corporate that's in focus this week as well, though, is Lufthansa. What's at stake for Lufthansa this week? And will the German government bailout package actually come together?
Well, on the line for Lufthansa, quite frankly, is the threat of insolvency. Its cash reserves right now are very low, with the coronavirus pandemic obviously hurting airlines more generally. But Lufthansa had been negotiating about a 9 billion euro bailout from the German government and European government. But now a billionaire, Heinz Hermann Thiel, who owns about 15% of Lufthansa, is threatening to block this bailout. He's concerned that it would dilute his holdings and his influence. And according to people familiar, he's set to make his case to the CEO today. The CEO earlier in a letter seen by Bloomberg voicing his concern that they wouldn't have the votes to get this through. If they can't have a breakthrough with this billionaire shareholder, it does go to an investor vote. But so far, only about 38% of shareholders have registered to vote. And because of that, because the sum is on the lower side, they need to secure a 2/3 of the vote, not a simple majority. And the CEO in that letter saying, "We face a fateful week for our Lufthansa."
Certainly sounds like it, either becoming basically state-owned or potentially facing collapse. Danny, thanks very much for that. Danny Berger there. And just to bring you up to date, currently the Lufthansa shares down almost 6%. So it's been bouncing around quite a lot in the last few moments.
Yeah, definitely weaker in today's session. Looking at equities more broadly, though, Roger, 25 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, futures were pointing strongly lower. The Stock 600 is in the red by 0.7%. US futures slightly positive. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. auto factories will be humming this week as the Detroit automakers race to make up for output lost to the pandemic. Ford and Fiat Chrysler say pre-pandemic manufacturing schedules in the U.S. will return starting today. GM has said it expects to be back to normal production by the end of the month. Auto demand has come back stronger than expected. J.P. Morgan Friday boosting its sales outlook for the year to 14.5 million vehicles. Wall Street will try to get back on track after new worries about the coronavirus pandemic left stocks mostly lower on Friday. Stephen Auth at Federated Global Investment says we could see more of the same for a while.
We think we're heading, significantly higher within a couple of years, but I think we'll be chopping a lot of wood between here and the rest of the year.
And we'll begin the week with an update on housing. Existing home sales, a measure of completed purchases, are expected to show a May decline. New home sales due tomorrow are expected to be up. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labour market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
Jenny List. You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
It's not business as usual right now, but Square has tools to help your business adapt. Like Square Online Store. You can start selling online in a few easy steps with pickup, delivery, and shipping options. And if you are selling in person, you can take contactless payments with hardware like Square Reader and Square Terminal. You'll get your money the very next business day, so you can put it to work. All these Square tools work together, no matter where you're selling, and there's never hidden fees or long-term commitments. Find out how Square can help you get back to business by visiting square.com/UK. Square Up Europe Limited is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority for the provision of payment services.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million Lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, 30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. It is a down day that we're looking at, that we've come off the lows. The Stock 600 down 0.3% after we saw green on the screen on Friday for European equities. FTSE 100 lower by 0.4%. The CAC 40 and the DAX down by about the same. The IBEX leads losses down 0.7%. The FTSE MIB down just over 0.3%. A little bit of divergence in terms of the US open, it looks like, because US futures are on the front foot. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all higher by about 0.8%. This after global equities had a weekly gain last week, even with all the fears over second wave risks surfacing for investors. But interestingly, you also saw safe haven assets rally. And speaking of those, the 10-year Treasury yield goes nowhere today, just below a 70 handle. The 10-year Bund yield at negative 41, steady. 10-year gilt yield slips a basis point and a half to a 22 handle. We did see some dollar strength for the week last week. We are a little weaker against G10 today. The Aussie outperforms, which is interesting because it did dip at one point in the Asian session on news that Victoria State was tightening some restrictions because of increasing cases over there. In terms of commodities more broadly, by the way, the pound is also slightly higher in today's session. We have an op-ed on the Bloomberg from the BOE's Andrew Bailey that's worth taking a look at, and that we'll discuss in a moment. Oil is now on the front foot. We were fairly steady for most of the Asian session. Weekly gain last week. WTI up 0.4%, 39.89. Brent at 42.51, up 0.8%. And with that backdrop in markets, you've got JP Morgan saying over the weekend, Roger, that investors should get more selective in the second half because asset returns are likely to diverge. Liquidity cannot paper over specific weaknesses indefinitely.
Well, one asset there won't be much return on if we turn to our top stories is likely to be Wirecard, because it says it's missing 1.9 billion euros, and that probably doesn't exist. The payments firm is withdrawing its results for fiscal 2019 and the first quarter of 2020. The company says it's in, quote, constructive discussions with lenders about renegotiating terms for its debt. The scandal's already seen Wirecard's shares collapse and its chief executive resign. Right now, Wirecard shares are down almost 40%.
Yeah, and stunning moves lower last week as well for that stock. Now, Lufthansa CEO says its bailout deal may not pass. Only 38% of shareholders are registered to vote at the carrier's extraordinary meeting on Thursday. That means the company needs 2/3 to approve the deal. If 50% had registered, it would only need a simple majority. This threatens to scupper the €9 billion bailout and push Europe's biggest airline towards collapse. And Lufthansa shares right now are down almost 8%, Roger.
Now, also, let's go to UK, where Boris Johnson's meeting senior ministers later to discuss plans to cut the 2-metre social distancing rule in England. The decision will be announced tomorrow, along with details of which sectors can reopen next month. Businesses are demanding clarity, but the PM says he's taking a cautious approach.
It's very important that we don't lose our vice-like grip on the disease. We've got to keep it on the floor where we've got it, and so we've got to keep making those trade-offs. But on the progress on social distancing, watch this space, and you won't have very much more to wait now.
Meanwhile, from today, non-essential shops are able to reopen in Wales, whilst face coverings are required on public transport in Scotland.
I wasn't allowed on a bus the other day, Roger. I tried to get on with all my shopping, didn't have a mask, and the driver wouldn't let me on.
There we are, you see. In action. And it's important. Now, I hope you've got a mask, and I hope you're going to wear it.
Nope. Okay, I'm just going to keep walking. That's what I'm going to do, not getting on transport. Now, meanwhile, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is considering an emergency cut to VAT. That's according to the Sunday Times. A Treasury spokesman said further measures would be set out ahead of Parliament's summer recess next month. That said, we have been provided by masks at Bloomberg, Roger. It's not an oversight by Bloomberg. It's just an oversight by me.
Right. Well, we're going to draw together all those sort of threads, including Nehra Chehij's semi-criminal conduct, when we talk to Ros Matheson a bit later in the programme. But now let's get the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. Let's start here in the UK, where a stabbing attack in Reading is now being investigated as an act of terrorism. On Saturday evening, eyewitnesses say a man approached a group of people in the town and stabbed them. A minute's silence will be held this morning for the 3 people who died in the incident. A 25-year-old Libyan refugee has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's appalled and sickened by what happened. Let's cross over to the US, where the disappointing turnout at President Trump's rally in Tulsa was just the latest warning sign for his campaign. The rally attracted far fewer supporters than the president and his advisors had promised, and it was overshadowed by criticism over his response to the pandemic and the protests against police brutality. Plus, the president has fallen behind Joe Biden in national polls and surveys of a key battleground. Hong Kong's pro-democracy camp has expressed concern about the path forward. That's after China has confirmed that a proposed national security law would allow it to override the city's independent legal system. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
The year began with high hopes that they might win a majority in this fall's key legislative council election for the first time. Now Hong Kong activists say the use of similar legislation in mainland China to jail journalists, human rights lawyers, and dissidents suggests they will face the same threat. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And military leaders from India and China are due to meet later today in a bid to de-escalate tensions along their disputed Himalayan border. Bloomberg's Ruth Pollard has all those details.
It follows the release of 10 Indian soldiers from Chinese military custody last week and the deaths of 20 others in clashes with Chinese troops after a weeks-long standoff along the unmarked boundary boiled over. It's hoped a trilateral meeting in Moscow between India, China and Russia tomorrow will further ease tensions between the neighbours. In New Delhi, Ruth Pollard, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thanks very much for that. Well, let's pick up on some of what we were talking about earlier in terms of the way the UK government is playing the dealing with the virus in the weeks to come. We're hearing quite a lot about easing coming, being announced potentially this week, and also, of course, action by the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. Well, joining us now is the International Government Executive Editor, Ros Matheson. So, Ros, welcome to the programme. Thanks for being with us. Let's kick off with what we expect this week in terms of announcements from Boris Johnson.
Well, as you said, Boris Johnson is due to provide some details in Parliament tomorrow after that review, particularly of the contentious 2-metre social distancing rule that has been in place in the UK. And he's under quite a lot of pressure to reduce that, obviously, not just for people at school, but also for businesses that they're trying to get operational again. We're expecting some announcement, particularly on that distance issue tomorrow. The question really is how that could then apply to the entertainment and hospitality industry, particularly pubs and restaurants, which have not yet had any word about how or whether they can reopen aside from takeaway. So that's the key thing in terms of getting that sector moving, is how can you reopen in a way that's financially viable if you have to still keep people 2 metres apart, or how can you have that work in a feasible way equally with things like hairdressers and beauty salons. So we're expecting some kind of announcement focused around that as a precursor to setting out rules for that industry in particular, to be able to allow small groups of people to start to come in and perhaps even sit down rather than just have takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely, Ros. It's interesting as well because this comes against a backdrop, of course, where there's been reports that we could see a potential VAT cut from the Chancellor. What else is sort of on the cards in terms of supporting the UK economy from here?
Well, that's right. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, is going to set out some modest stimulus measures this month. What we're hearing, this won't be anything like a mini budget. That will be later in the fall, and also certain tax and spending measures at this point may not have as much effect as you want, simply because people don't have the ability to get out and spend. One thing that may be on the table is a short-term VAT cut that's been talked about in the local media here. What we're hearing, though, is it's one of many measures that are on the table and that no decisions have been taken as yet, particularly because a VAT cut can be a bit of a blunt instrument because you then have to rely on retailers to pass that cut on to consumers, or that consumers then getting that saving would spend it rather than save it. So at this point, there's no great hint that a VAT cut would be on the table. What probably will be rather is a focus on getting some big bang infrastructure projects up and running, roads, broadband, and so on, and also some money to head towards retraining for people who will be in sectors or working at companies that in the future will no longer exist. So the two things that will probably be an immediate focus for CNAC in that package this month will be around skills and infrastructure.
Ros, thanks very much indeed. Ros Matheson there, International Government Executive Editor, talking about what we may see this week. Government coming in for a lot of criticism at the moment. Peter Piot, leading epidemiologist, saying that the quarantine rule is frankly ridiculous. And don't forget, on Bloomberg Westminster today, we're going to be talking to Carol Sikora, another leading scientific critic of the government's pattern in dealing with this virus. Hear what he has to say at noon on Bloomberg Westminster. This is Bloomberg.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
My name is Donya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a computer or to someone called Colin or Jack or Miguel or Haley or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
We've got a lot of catching up to do.
Hi there, everybody. Lovely to be with you again.
Over 100 live games in just 6 weeks on Sky Sports. With 64 Premier League and 45 EFL Championship games, everything is still to play for. Scores to sell, relegation to avoid, Europe up for grabs, and the titles to win. Upgrade to Sky Sports today. Requires Sky Sports Premier League and football packs. See sky.com/sports for details.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr. and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
Use 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we are seeing European stocks in the red this morning. The DAX down 0.2%, similarly so for the CAC 40, the FTSE, and the Stock 600 recouping some earlier losses that we saw at the open, and perhaps that is because US futures are firmly in the green. It comes as investors weigh second wave concerns with a lot of monetary stimulus in the markets right now. However, we did see the Hang Seng in particular slip in Asian trading earlier, but this after Beijing confirmed that its new security legislation will be giving it authority to override Hong Kong's legal system. If we look at a couple of stock specifics, I'm keeping a close eye on Deutsche Lufthansa, slipping 6% in Frankfurt this morning. This as there are suggestions of a clash between its biggest investor and the German government that could threaten to scupper that €9 billion bailout for Europe's biggest airlines. So something to watch there. Over in the currency markets, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index now down by 0.2%. We are seeing the yen slightly weaker, very near 107 at this point. The offshore yuan is unchanged at 7.07 after the PBOC left its loan prime rate unchanged. The Korean won currently down 0.5% after trade data showed exports declined in June, albeit less than expected. We're seeing sterling gaining 0.5% up to 124. The euro trading at 112 this morning. 10-year Treasury yields little changed at 70 basis points. 10-year Bund yields holding at negative 42. 10-year gilt yields slightly weaker at 22 basis points. WTI standing pat at $39 a barrel, and we're seeing gold slightly bid at $1,746 a troy ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. California's new cases of coronavirus rose by a record this weekend. It's adding to fears that there is a second wave in some parts of the U.S. The World Health Organization says the Americas region now accounts for 63% of new cases. That's led by Brazil, which reported over 54,000 new infections yesterday. Now, Germany's coronavirus infection rate has risen for a third day, lifted by local outbreaks, including at a slaughterhouse. The infection rate, known as the R number, has risen to 2.88, meaning each person with the virus is passing it on to at least 3 others. The country's death rate has so far been relatively low at fewer than 9,000. And finally, the guitar Kurt Cobain played at Nirvana's historic MTV Unplugged concert has sold for a record $6 million at an auction in Beverly Hills. Nirvana's acoustic performance in 1993 is now considered one of history's greatest live performances. Cobain died just 5 months after that appearance. The guitar will be displayed at a worldwide exhibition tour. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, do you remember that concert at all? I certainly don't. I don't think I've ever seen it, actually.
I do remember it. I remember seeing it. I remember when we could buy CDs, we moved them on from tapes, we moved on from mini discs. My first CD was actually a Nirvana CD.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an amazing concert.
It was amazing.
It was. There was one, I think he did a cover of David Bowie, The Man Who Sold the World, which is terrific. It actually, not better than the original, but good.
He was very talented, and I feel like It Smells Like Teen Spirit was the anthem to my young teenage days.
I have to say, I haven't seen many MTV Unplugged, except for one of Lauryn Hill's with her track Peace of Mind. That was amazing. She actually started crying at the end of the song. But
Fuji's great band, too, that she was in.
Yeah, absolutely. Leanne Gerrans with the world news, giving us 2 music updates, actually, in this hour today. I'm liking it. Let's get to the markets now with James Athey from Aberdeen Standard Investments, where he's investment director. Great to have you with us, James, as always. Won't ask you about Kurt Cobain, but feel free to comment at any point on that if you want. What I do want to ask you about is JP Morgan saying investors should get more selective in the second half. Asset returns are likely to diverge, they say, because liquidity cannot paper over specific weaknesses indefinitely, and an indiscriminate approach to a portfolio that would have largely worked in April and May is not something that you can sort of count on from here. I'm paraphrasing. But meanwhile, you were quoted in a Bloomberg story, as you often are, to be fair, about yield curve control setting off a buy everything rally, which is quite different to what JP Morgan is saying. Is that really something we should expect from yield curve control globally?
Morning, Nara. I'd much prefer to stick on MTV Unplugged, to be honest. I'm going to throw George Michael's MTV Unplugged out there, because that was absolutely fantastic. So was Eric Clapton's. But whatever they did in that studio, they managed to get excellent performances out of just about everybody that went on there. Buy everything. Yeah, I say that through gritted teeth. It's not something that I think should be the case, but it's just one of those Pavlovian kind of responses from markets, whereby when the central bank is there and providing support and is deemed or expected to provide further support as and when we see any further weakness, it does just lead to one of those cross-asset buy everything sort of rallies. Now, I agree with the point that JP Morgan are making. Now, I would argue that should be occurring now, which is to say that what the Fed are not doing is providing revenues to companies in the real economy. And so those companies that are, particularly affected by what we've seen in terms of lockdown, or particularly affected by likely changes in consumer behavior going forward, and or those companies that already had way too much debt and have loaded on more debt. And by the way, when you include all of those groups, that's a lot of companies. Those companies are not necessarily going to be made more healthy or profitable by what the Fed is doing. And therefore, really, it's just a matter of time. It's a drip, 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 slow bleed for those companies, but they will likely face default risk at some point.
Yeah.
You don't want to be owning those credits. Sorry, Roger.
No, Joe, I was just going to say, one of the interesting lines that came up in earlier discussions about yield curve control was the suggestion that it could very well lead to some sort of bubble in effect, and that this is a risk that has to be borne in mind. I mean, do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, William, who wrote the piece that Nara referenced there, he asked the very same question, and my snap response really is to say, I think that's in the rearview mirror. Essentially a bubble is described by a psychologiul process of buying regardless of valuation, because you think things will go up and because you think you'll be able to sell them on to another investor, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I look around and I see evidence of that sort of behaviour and that sort of market pricing in a heck of a lot of places. So I would already be concerned. I mean, it's a dirty word almost to use the B word. Central bankers are certainly reluctant. I don't think Jay Powell gave a very robust response when asked that question by Mike McKee after the last meeting. But essentially, you look at the behaviour of markets and its ability to ignore bad news, embrace marginal good news, and really issue any sort of valuation metrics for just about every asset. That already looks like that sort of psychology is occurring.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it? When we started talking about the buy everything rally, it's sort of on the prospect of yield curve control somewhere in the future. But if and when it actually happens, say by the Fed or by the BOE, James, will the reaction in risk assets not actually depend on at what point of the curve is targeted and how it's implemented?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nara. That's absolutely true. I'm a bit surprised by what I've heard from the Fed about the discussion they seem to be having around yield curve control. It seems to be more in the direction of what the RBA is doing in Australia, using yield curve control as an extension of forward guidance and really trying to keep short-dated, maybe out to the front of intermediate-dated yields under control rather than looking further out the curve. I don't really see that as particularly necessary or particularly effective, if you like. I think their credibility is such that forward guidance is very powerful at keeping those short dates under control. The market is not looking to test the Fed on early rate hikes, and certainly I don't think will be for some time just yet. So I would have thought yield curve control would be something more useful further out the curve, especially when you've got so much supply coming from the Treasury and so much duration supply coming from the Treasury, wanting to ensure that yields don't come unstuck by just the supply-demand imbalance because of so many treasuries coming into the market. That would be something more powerful, I think, if the Fed went to lock down 10 or even 30-year yields. That would be something that would be a material booster to risk sentiment. If they were to say, look, we're targeting 3, 4, 5-year yields at 25 or 30 basis points, I don't think that's going to have a huge impact on markets.
James, moving on to another aspect of what's in Andrew Bailey's intram. He's got a piece on the Bloomberg this morning, an opinion piece, the Bank of England governor signalling a major shift, really, in the strategy of removing emergency stimulus. He wants to shrink the balance sheets before any talk of rate hikes. I mean, what's your take on that?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's definitely a break from previous guidance that we've had. What we've learned, really, is that shrinking the balance sheet is not easy, because that really is what markets have become addicted to. Low rates obviously help, but it's the balance sheet expansion, the supply of reserves into the banking system, which has driven financial asset prices so far. And it's why QE has not really been effective for the real economy, because you're ploughing all of this money into the financial system and you're relying on certain transmissions to get that into the real economy, and those transmissions aren't working because a lot of institutions would say, well, why do I need to look at the real economy when there is so much easy, quote unquote, easy money to be made in financial assets? So that, for me, as somebody who thinks that central banks have gone way too far in some of the things they get up to and don't prioritise financial stability so much, I think it's good to hear that. I would worry about how easily they'll be able to do it.
Yeah, and there's questions over the impact on money market funds as well in that column. James Athey, Investment Director at Aberdeen Standard Investments. Great to have you with us. European equities in the red, but coming off the lows, the Stock 600 off 0.1%. This is Bloomberg.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Asda, we've provided 3,500 care homes with priority access to delivery slots, and priority shopping hours are open to our care workers. We're also donating 250,000 face masks to care homes. Asda, we're all in this together. Please show ID for priority shopping. Check asda.com for times.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. The Central London Congestion Charge, Ultra Low Emission Zone Daily Charge and the London-wide Low Emission Zone Charge are back in operation to help reduce congestion and pollution. The Daily Congestion Charge has now increased to £15 and operates from 7am to 10pm 7 days a week. NHS Trust and care home workers can claim reimbursements. For more information, search TfL Driving. To the Mayor of London and TfL, Every journey matters.
A squirt for you, a squeeze for me, a splodge for the kids, and that makes 3. A splat coming in, a splot going out. A safe pair of hands is what it's about. A squirt for you. When you're out and about, keep Carex antibacterial hand sanitizer on hand. With 70% alcohol to kill viruses and 99.99% of bacteria, every squirt means you're in safe hands, helping to keep you safe and protected. That's why we Carex. Always read the label and use sanitizer safely. Find out more at carex.co.uk.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. It's also a special day for us.
How special, Matt? Just how special?
It's a reunion. You're back with me. I love it.
I am. Well, working from home briefly took me away from my radio duties, but now the front room of my house has been entirely dedicated to TV and radio broadcasting, and I'm back again.
That's excellent. And what a day to come back. So much incredible news. The Wirecard scandal that's been brewing for a year suddenly blew up at the end of last week. And we haven't seen a day with less than, 25, 30% drops. I think the stock's down about 45% right now.
Yeah, the stock down 38% now, once again, isn't it, Matt? I mean, at what point do we start talking about this? Not pennies. We're not talking about pennies just yet. We're not talking about it trading in cents. It's at €15.97. But these percentage moves start to mean less and less, don't they?
Yeah, well, it's exactly. It's worth less. It's worth a smaller weighting, for example, on the DAX now than it was on Thursday. A move in Wirecard or Wednesday could single-handedly pull down the DAX index. Today, it's not doing that so much, right? We saw bigger losses earlier in the trading session for the broader benchmark DAX index, and they have now. What do you say? The losses have dissipated? That's not right, is it? They've lessened at least. So now we're only looking at drops of 0.1% of the DAX. Earlier in the session, it was more than 1%. Same with the CAC 40, though. Really across indexes, you see losses lessened. The FTSE right now down only about 1/3 of 1% to 62.69.
Yeah, European equity markets then on the back foot, as you say there, Matt. Worth noting, though, that US futures point higher. US futures up by between 8 and 9% right now for the major indexes. We did see a little bit of a loss in Friday's session towards the end on Wall Street, and so Europe has a bit of catching up to do before perhaps we join that rally. I mean, we do sit here with losses on the Stock 600 down 0.2%, but we'll see how long that lasts if US markets get underway in positive territory. Interesting that investors do seem able to put aside concerns around the virus for the moment. We saw that dominating last week, concerns around a second wave, or should that be called a continuation of the first wave. That did seem to be one of the dominant themes, but once again, another dominant theme is central bank support, and that also being talked about a lot by investors. If you're going to have a strategy through these tricky times, buying what central banks are buying might be part of it. We do see oil prices a touch firmer, but not much in it. Gold prices also moving higher in today's session, so up by just 0.1% or so in the gold price, around 17.46 we trade. We see some selling in government bonds, particularly in US treasuries, those yields going just a touch higher, but no big moves. We also see some money coming out of the dollar, so it's not exactly a very simple picture of risk on, risk off in today's session then, Matt. We've got the dollar weaker by around 0.2% the pound actually making some decent gains this morning, up by 0.6%. We had a really interesting op-ed from Andrew Bailey. We'll get to this later on in the programme. He's the governor of the Bank of England, of course, and he was setting out a plan, a strategy for how the bank might get out of this extraordinary policy when the time comes. He's not suggesting the time is right now, but he was certainly warning the markets that central bank reserves or balance sheets should not be taken for granted.
Yeah, and kind of giving us a look at maybe a surprise look at sequencing. I don't know what you expected before, but he says they're going to sell down the balance sheet before they raise rates. So it
makes me think about the taper tantrum from the Fed some years ago when markets got themselves all in a tangle over how the Fed was going to emerge from extraordinary stimulus. I wonder if market thinking has moved on or not.
So many taper tantrums to come. I can feel it in my bones. Let's bring in someone who lived through that. Paul Markham has a couple decades experience in the finance industry, and he joins us now from Newton Investment Management, where he's a global equities portfolio manager. Paul, what do you think about the taper tantrums to come? Can you see any clear signs where central banks have set themselves up?
Yeah, hi again, Matt, Anna. Well, I think it's an interesting piece of commentary from the governor. It seems that the natural mechanism, if you like, about allowing rates to rise through there being, more supply out there effectively is probably the way that they're thinking about it. And that would seem to be a signal that the bank is looking to return to something more akin to a traditional market mechanism and trying to sort of withdraw a little bit from the more interventionist stance that we've seen. And that's been characterized also by what has effectively been a kind of MMT being in operation, which is something which the bank sort of talked about as a temporary measure, but it's something which is certainly a very significant development really for market watchers. I think from the point of view of there being a potential taper tantrum, I think that you're absolutely right. Markets that have been quite sanguine, as Anna mentioned, in some cases, may well find themselves feeling quite exposed by this, and there could be some kind of short-term sell-off. But I think from a structural perspective, I think people that are thinking on a longer-term basis will be quite comforted by the idea that a central bank is not willing to sort of keep these very heavy stimulus packages in place permanently. So there may well be a better longer-term outcome, but in the near term, I think that kind of action will lead to some kind of volatility.
You mentioned MMT, modern monetary theory. I mean, why do you think that Andrew Bailey, the governor, has decided to put out a piece right now around the unwinding of stimulus when a lot of people we talk to, and certainly at the aftermath of the last Bank of England meeting, was, OK, you've done a bit more on QE, but what are you going to do next to stimulate the UK economy rather than take back stimulus? Why start this kind of conversation now, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Anna. I think that the governor is looking to establish some credentials of wanting to keep an eye on the longer-term view and making sure that markets don't get too hooked on the central bank always being there as a safety net. And I think, traditionally, we've always had that market mechanism in place in fixed income markets to really intermediate pricing. So, MMT or kind of very heavy direct influence over rate levels is something which, is not really desirable because it ultimately ends up being politically driven and it can then become very inflationary. And of course, that's something which, on the longer term, the central banks won't want. But in the near term, they'll like it. They'll like it in a controllable, or what they would see as being a controllable fashion. Experience would teach that when you get sort of too complacent about rates and when you have too much political interference, that always ends up being over-inflationary, and it's really hard to get that back into the box. So I suspect that this is a kind of signaling mechanism really from the bank to make sure that markets know that this is, unconditional support is not going to be there permanently. It should also be remembered, of course, that the governor has been very clear that he will do whatever it takes to step in, and we saw additional stimulus come in last week. So it may seem counterintuitive, but I think it's really trying to emphasise the difference between emergency measures and a longer-term strategy or outlook.
Which is important, I think, to point out, because a lot of people have gotten used to the fact that emergency measures, they typically just stay in place forever. I'm still paying here in Germany the solidarity tax that was raised to help East Germany come together with West Germany more than 30 years ago. And I moved here 3 years ago, and now I'm paying still the solidarity tax, and you wonder if it's ever, that kind of thing it goes away. If these central banks are successful, Paul, and I guess you expect them to be successful in reflating economies. What's the investor to do? How does an investor make money out of this?
Well, I mean, for the equity investor, if you do believe that the markets or the economy is set fair for some kind of sustainable reflationary outcome, then it's the value areas of the market and it's commodities and it's emerging, and you short the US dollar. That's the really sort of traditional reaction to that scenario. I think that if you start to see, as that inflation takes hold, that it's not accompanied by any underlying economic growth, that it's cost push driven inflation, or that it's ultimately stagflationary, that's a kind of 1970s scenario. And of course, the economy will be vulnerable to externalities, as we were in the 1970s with a very high oil price in 73, 74. And that sort of thing then much more favours real assets, real estate and goals, and maybe index linked on the fixed income side, and certain kinds of equity. But even equities can't serve as a inflation hedge in perpetuity. Earnings are nominal; they're not real. So, from that point of view, that is the most difficult scenario. I think if you end up in a kind of benignly reflationary environment, that's very positive for cyclicals and very positive for value and very positive for commodities.
Paul, thanks very much for joining us. Paul Markham, Global Equities Portfolio Manager at Newton Investment Management.
By the way, very cool red headline here, Anna, on the Bloomberg terminal. China's Mutai surpasses the ICBC as the biggest mainland stock. So the ICBC is, of course, the big Chinese bank, the big Chinese state bank, and Mutai.
Mutai is not.
No, Mutai produces this very popular alcoholic beverage, that you only get, I think, in China. I recall seeing Richard Nixon drink a glass of Mutai when he first went to visit the Chinese. I mean, I don't recall, I wasn't there personally, but I have seen.
You're not that old.
I've seen video of it. Okay, let's get over Leanne Gerrans with your global news headlines. Leanne?
Thanks, Matt. Let's start here in the UK. This week, Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the government will set out more details on plans to reduce lockdown restrictions for the beginning of July. Bloomberg's Charles Capel reports.
The country's coronavirus alert level was reduced from 4 to 3 last week, indicating virus transmission is no longer rising exponentially, but COVID-19 is still in general circulation. Hancock also said a decision will come on whether the 2-metre social distancing requirement could be cut to 1 metre. The move could be accompanied by requirements to wear masks or more use of perspex screens in shops. The cut would also allow more businesses to open and more people to be in one place at a time, and please those highly concerned about the economic impact of the lockdown. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Staying in the UK, where a stabbing attack in Reading is now being investigated as an act of terrorism. On Saturday evening, eyewitnesses say a man approached a group of people in the town and stabbed them. A minute's silence will be held later this morning for the 3 people who died in the incident. A 25-year-old Libyan refugee has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Now let's cross over to the US, where the disappointing turnout at President Trump's rally in Tulsa is just the latest warning sign for his campaign. The rally attracted far fewer supporters than the president and his advisors had promised, and it was overshadowed by criticism over his response to the coronavirus pandemic and the protests against police brutality. Plus, the president has fallen behind Joe Biden in national polls. And Australia's second most populous state has tightened coronavirus controls. Bloomberg's Jason Scott says this comes as a spike triggers fears of a second wave.
Victoria extended a state of emergency by 4 weeks to July 20, halved the number of visitors allowed in homes to 5, and delayed a planned increase in the size of gatherings in cafes, restaurants and pubs. Victoria State has recorded 116 cases in the past week. 87 of those were associated with community transmission, mostly in Melbourne. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
When the market is unpredictable, BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
For a look at the global and Asian economies as they weather the pandemic, we turn to Oxford Economics Chief Australia economist Sarah Hunter. There's been the argument that in Asia we'll see a quicker recovery because a lot of these economies were either sort of first in and first out of the pandemic. But how meaningful are these individual domestic recoveries when we don't have open borders for tourism, for the services sector to be able to really recover?
To some extent, it does matter because domestic demand is crucial for all economies. But you're right, the openness of Asia and Asia's reliance on global trade is a very important part of what drives the outlook overall. And it isn't going to be possible for there to be a complete recovery in any open economy before the rest of the world is able to get back to normal. New Zealand is probably a really good example of that. So their economy, they've obviously removed completely now domestic restrictions. They've managed to eliminate the virus at home, but they until they can fully open their borders and allow the tourists back in, who are such an important part of their economy, it's going to be impossible for them to recover completely. So yes, that does really matter. But having said that, there are going to be differences in terms of how economies come through, and some will be more impacted than others.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, we are seeing European stocks in the red. The CAC 40 down 0.2%. The FTSE slipping 0.4 here in London. The Stock 600 down 0.2 as well. And the DAX fairly flat. They have recouped earlier losses that happened at the open. US futures are pointing high, and perhaps that is why we're seeing the European stocks claw back some of those earlier losses. But it is also partly because we did see Asian markets in particular fairly mixed this morning. The Hang Seng closed down by about 0.5% after Beijing confirmed its new security legislation will give it authority to override Hong Kong's legal system. In stocks, I am keeping a particular eye on Lufthansa, Europe's biggest airline, headed for a clash between its biggest shareholder and the German government. Could that potentially scupper the bailout? Very interesting one to watch there, at least the stock trading lower today. In the currency markets, the Bloomberg dollar spot index is slightly weaker, down 0.2%. We're seeing the yen holding at 106.9, sterling up 0.6 at 1 124. The euro at 112 this morning. 10-year Treasury yields standing pat at 69 basis points. 10-year bund yields at negative 43. 10-year gilt yield slipping 2 basis points to 21 basis points. WTI standing pat at $39 a barrel, and gold slightly bid at $1,748 a troy ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Lynn Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Italy is looking at widening its budget deficit in the wake of coronavirus. The government plans to focus on infrastructure projects such as high-speed rail. It may approve a cut to VAT to stem the pandemic's impact on the economy. The news comes as Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte is drawing up an ambitious reform plan to lobby the European Union for financial help. Now, in Germany, there's been a surge in cases of coronavirus, with new cases reported in hospitals, care homes, refugee centres and following religious gatherings. The infection rate, known as the R number, has risen to 2.88, meaning each person with the virus is passing it on to almost 3 others. The country's death rate has so far been relatively low at fewer than 9,000. And Ed Sheeran's been named the UK's most played artist of 2019. He's taken the title 4 times over the last 5 years. Calvin Harris was second, with Sam Smith in third place. The list is based on music played on radio and TV, as well as in pubs, clubs and shops. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by Bloomberg editor Paul Gordon, who's across our top op-ed this morning. Central bank reserves can't be taken for granted by Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey. Paul, what do you think about Bailey's piece here, basically giving us the sequencing he would prefer?
Yes, it's important that this is his opinion, as you say, but then again, he is the governor. He holds quite a lot of sway. And it's a striking position to lay out, because it is, in some ways, the reverse of what his predecessor, Mark Carney, wanted. Bailey is saying that he prefers to shrink the balance sheet of the Bank of England before raising interest rates. Now, the vast bulk of the balance sheet is asset purchases made under the bond buying program. So that suggests QE would be unwound before interest rates rise. Under Mark Carney, the plan was to raise rates first, get them to 1.5%, and only then start to wind down QE. So quite a change.
Good morning to you, Paul. Quite a change. What do you make of the timing of this particular comment piece then by Andrew Bailey? It comes at a time when many of the guests we talk to about Bank of England expectations say they expect the Bank of England to be doing more stimulus, not less, in the near term. So we need to see this piece perhaps as a little devoid from what is next expected from the BOE.
It's certainly fairly long-term thinking, isn't it? Yes, the timing is quite surprising. I think the way to look at that is to look at one of the other key comments he made, which is that there is a weakness in the financial system, and that is money market funds. They're there to provide liquidity. Money markets invest in low-risk assets. But come the crisis, the fund managers found they couldn't offload those assets as the redemptions came in. They couldn't generate the liquidity needed, and that's why one reason why the Bank of England had to step in. What Bailey seems to be saying is you've got to fix this, because if we want to go back to a market-based financial system and not a central bank-reliant financial system, then you've got to solve these problems. So it's a warning shot to the money market funds, and in that context, maybe now is a good time to do it.
He's also he's also sort of putting up a wall around central bank independence, or fortifying, I guess, the independence that he believes central bankers enjoy, saying this crisis has shown how essential that independence is. It's almost like a victory lap, Paul. Do you think that central banks are really so independent from the governments that they're basically repping?
Well, Well, it's independence, it's autonomy of operations, if you like. I mean, the central bank has always been open about this. It gets its remit from the government. So there is always going to be a link there. But what he's saying is that because the Bank of England has independence of operation, it could choose what to do. It chose to take steps which basically help the government, which means to help the whole of society. And that does not undermine its independence. It enables its independence. So he says the BOE's capacity to act must be reinforced and not mistakenly called into question. So it's quite a strong defense, but there is something of a nuance in there.
All right, Paul, thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time today. I know it's very busy for you. Paul Gordon, their Bloomberg editor, covers our central banks across Europe. You can read that piece by Andrew Bailey, by the way, and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion. If you're on the internet, if you're on the terminal, just type obviously OPIN go. By the way, in terms of the equity indexes this morning, we had losses of more than 1% at the start of trading. And we've really pared those losses down in many places. So, for example, the DAX is only down about 0.2% right now. The CAC is down less than 0.3%. The FTSE down about 0.4%. We'll come back and tell you what's going on in Germany. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Lynx are cutting pay and staff due to the financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The organization says it has temporarily reduced salaries for employees earning $70,000 or more annually and laid off an unspecified amount of its full-time workforce. The virus outbreak prompted the NBA to halt play on March 11th. The WNBA has yet to begin the 2020 season. Nebraska football coach Scott Frost and men's basketball coach Fred Hoiberg will donate a portion of their salaries to the athletic department's general operating fund to help offset revenue shortfalls because of the coronavirus pandemic. Frost's salary is $5 million this year. Hoiberg is set to earn $3 million. The athletic department says the amount of the donations will be determined when the 2021 budget is closer to being finalized. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Have you wanted to speak a new language? You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to an algorithm or to someone called Al, or Priya, or Lewis, or Zoe, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. It is 9:30 where I am in London. It is 10:30 in Paris or Berlin. You're welcome. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, and it's good to be back on the programme.
It's great to have you back. Thanks so much for rejoining me. I didn't know if you were ever going to come back, but it's the perfect team, Anna. We make the perfect team. Am I patting myself on the back too much there? No.
I think so. But
it's because of you.
With you, so that's
It's
fine.
because of you that we make the perfect team. Let me give you quickly a rundown of what's going on in the equity indexes. We had more than 1% drop across all of the major equity indexes in Europe at the beginning of trade this morning. And now it looks like those losses are dissipating to some extent. The DAX right now is still down, but only 0.1% The FTSE and the CAC are down by more like a quarter to a third of 1%. But if you're getting ready for the U.S. Open this morning, we see green arrows in terms of futures, and those numbers are getting bigger and bigger in positive territory. So now looking at 0.7% gains on Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ E-mini futures. Looks like it could be a risk-on day. And we could even see a turn to green for European equity indexes throughout this session. In terms of oil right now, we don't see a lot of movement, if any, there. For example, Brent crude is up, but only 2 cents to 42.21. NYMEX WTI is completely unchanged at 39.75. So not a lot of movement there. Not a lot of movement in gold at 1747.40 a troy ounce. And U.S. yields are coming off just a little right now. 68.55 is the level on Treasury, 0.6855. If you look at bonds right now, they're trading for negative 43 basis points and gilts for 2066. Anna?
Matt, let's get back to one of our top stories this morning. The scandal deepening at Wirecard. $2.1 billion has gone missing from the payment firm's balance sheet. Now Wirecard says the cash probably didn't exist. It's the latest in a dramatic fall from grace for a company once considered the future of German fintech. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg senior editor Benedict Kamel, who joins us now. Benny, good to speak to you. So the missing billions, what is the latest? What do we know? Will Wirecard survive the week?
Good question. If you look at the stock price, it's really in the middle of a death spiral at this point. They fell dramatically last week, and it continues today, down almost 50% in their peak. We saw Moody's cut the company deep into junk. We have lenders asking, will this company survive? Are Are we going to throw good money after bad? And this is really a company fighting for its survival. And it's worth reminding people that this not so long ago was sort of a new star in the DAX. They recently made it into this index, and they were sort of seen as German fintech future, and it's left everybody with a lot of egg on their face at this point. So as to these $2 billion, the latest twist is after the company said we're looking for them, and now they say they might not even exist. So that is highly unusual and very problematic for the company, and as I said, it's reflected in the stock price.
Well, and I have to say, Benny, not everyone has egg on his face here. Many journalists, kicked off by the Financial Times, have been investigating Wirecard and coming up with very problematic question marks over the last year, to the point where Carson Block, the famous short seller from Muddy Waters, was getting rid of this stock. Then he couldn't, because BaFin, the German regulator, stepped in and disallowed short selling on this one individual company. The first time and the last time it's ever done that. Is anyone going to be asking questions about why BaFin did that for Wirecard? I mean, what's the connection between the regulator and the company? Is there a regulator for the regulator?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a very good point, and credit where credit is due. The FT has been on the case for more than a year on this, with a series of scathing articles, and it looks as if they were certainly onto something here. And you raise a good point. I mean, was the regulator barking up the wrong tree, when they ultimately went after short sellers, and let's not forget after the FT, when they should have been going after Marcus Brown, the CEO who quit last week, and we know very little about him right now.
Because they looked into the FT, because they actually investigated the journalists at the FT, didn't they, Ben?
They did. And with Marcus Brown, we don't know what his whereabouts right now. Is he in a basement somewhere in Munich, or with a document shredder in overdrive? We don't know, and so there's a lot of questions here, and it's there's a certain amount of irony here that a company, for any company to have $2 billion missing is problematic, but if you're a company whose job it is to facilitate the secure transaction, this is a fairly unrecoverable situation. So a lot of questions there.
Yeah, certainly one that we haven't heard the last of, have we? That story, even as the share price is nothing like it was, it's a fraction of its former self. Let's talk about another German story briefly, Benny, then, that's certainly set to move this week, and that is around Lufthansa. Will the government bailout package come together? It's facing some pushback from one of its big shareholders.
That's right. So Heinz-Hermann Thiele is the biggest shareholder in the company. He was a fairly reclusive billionaire who owns a bunch of German companies or stakes therein, and he's reportedly unhappy about the government-orchestrated bailout. To remind people, this is sort of $9 billion is the total package that was secured a couple of weeks ago, and it looked as if that would help Lufthansa make it through the coronavirus crisis. Now, with the extraordinary shareholders meeting looming this week, it looks as if Thiele might have second thoughts and wants to get a better deal. It's unclear whether he'll get that, and he's at risk as much as everybody else. He's an equity holder. He could easily get wiped out if Lufthansa goes into insolvency. So whether this is a high-stakes gamble and he gets his way, or whether the government says, this is a deal, take it or leave it, that's a very good question. There's a meeting today between Thiele and key government stakeholders and the people who put it together, this deal, but this really could go either way at this point.
Benedict, thanks very much. Bloomberg's senior editor, Benedict Kamel. It is fascinating, Matt.
Yeah, there's so much going on in corporate news, especially here in Germany. I was up very early, stuck to my eyes glued to my Bloomberg terminal, just reading through, and it's one of those. It's like a mystery. I can't wait to find out what happens with Heinz-Hermann Thiele and Lufthansa. What happens with Lufthansa? Where's that? What happens with Wirecard? Where's that $2 billion? As Benny said, where's the CEO? What's he doing? So much to talk about, and we have a lot more in global news headlines. For that, let's go to Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Matt, thank you. Boris Johnson's meeting senior ministers later to discuss plans to cut the 2-metre social distancing rule here in England. The decision will be announced tomorrow, along with details of which sectors can reopen next month. Businesses are demanding clarity, but the PM says he's taking a cautious approach.
It's very important that we don't lose our vice-like grip on the disease. We've got to keep it on the floor where we've got it, and so we've got to keep making those trade-offs. But on the progress on social distancing, watch this space, and you won't have very much more to wait now.
Meanwhile, from today, non-essential shops are able to reopen in Wales, while face coverings are required in all public transport in Scotland. Let's go to the US. Disappointing crowds for President Donald Trump's first campaign rally since the coronavirus outbreak. The event in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, attracted far fewer supporters than the White House had touted. It was overshadowed by continuing criticism of the president's response to the pandemic and his reaction to protests against police brutality.
You are warriors. Thank you. We had some very bad people outside. They were doing bad things. I stand before you today to declare the silent majority is stronger than ever before.
Now, California's new cases of coronavirus rose by a record this weekend. It's adding to fears that there is a second wave in some parts of the U.S. The World Health Organization says the Americas region now accounts for 63% of new cases. That's led by Brazil, which reported over 54,000 new infections yesterday. And China has confirmed its proposed national security law would allow Beijing to override Hong Kong's legal system. The announcement sheds new light on a move that threatens the city's status as a top financial center. State media says the proposal will give the central government jurisdiction over an extremely small number of national security cases. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Matt.
Leanne, thanks very much. When we come back, we're going to speak to the CIO at UBS Wealth Management, Mark Heffela. He manages more than $2 trillion in invested assets. So we will, of course, get his take on what a second virus wave means for the markets as investors kick off the week looking for direction. This is Bloomberg.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
What's the bottom line? That answer may be uncomfortably uncertain these days. But corporate leaders facing pressure on profitability know one thing for sure. GEP can help. GEP's unified procurement and supply chain solutions help reduce costs, improve performance, and boost EBITDA, helping great companies stay on track and primed for the next phase of the business cycle. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like when your week off is forecast warm and sunny. Or when there's an extra unclaimed sausage left on the barbecue. Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that feeling. Nice, isn't it? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
When you buy tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a computer or to someone called Colin, or Derek, or Sanjay, or Sue, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, it's Ali. What are you searching for?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
TfL has a plan to help London reopen carefully, safely and sustainably. You can do your bit by continuing to work from home if you can and avoiding public transport. If you have to use public transport, you must now wear a face covering at all times, avoid peak hours and wash your hands before and after travel. For everyone's safety, we regularly clean our services with antiviral disinfectant and will be providing hand sanitizer across our network. For more information, search TfL's Restart Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Enjoy peace of mind with Ford. Relax and think about 3 months deferred payment on a new vehicle. Visualize an additional 3 months cash back. Breathe deeply and let 0% APR representative on selected vehicles wash over you. That's peace of mind from Ford. Current promotion ends 30th of June. Search Ford Peace of Mind for details.
Only available with Ford credit on selected finance plans. Exclusions and deposit restrictions may apply.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and it's a bit of a mixed trading day for European stocks. We're seeing the FTSE flat here in London, similarly so for the Stock 600. The DAX up 0.2%, the CAC 40 also gaining 0.2%, and it's reversing earlier losses essentially as US futures are firmly in the green this morning. This as investors weigh second wave virus concerns against a serious flow of monetary stimulus in the markets. So if we look at a couple of stock specifics I want to highlight, Lufthansa falling 6% in Frankfurt this morning amid concerns that a clash between its top shareholder and the German government could scupper the bailout plans for Europe's biggest airline. Wirecard shares also finally trading now down 33% at the moment, so quite a bit to keep an eye on in the German stock market this morning. In the currency market, the Bloomberg dollar spot index index is now down 0.3%. So the greenback continuing its lower march. The yen holding around 106.9. We're seeing the offshore yuan unchanged at 7.07 after the PBOC left its loan prime rate unchanged. The Korean won, meanwhile, down 0.5% after trade data showed exports declined in June, albeit less than expected. Sterling bid up 0.7% at 124. The euro at 112 this morning. 10-year Treasury yields are holding at 69 basis points. 10-year bund yields at negative 42. 10-year gilt yields down 2 basis points at 22 basis points. WTI standing pat at $39 a barrel, and we are seeing gold slightly bid up 0.2% at $1,748 a troy ounce amid concerns of a second virus wave. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Let's start here in the UK, where a stabbing attack in Reading is now being investigated as an act of terrorism. On Saturday evening, eyewitnesses say a man approached a group of people in the town and stabbed them. A minute's silence will be held this morning for the 3 people who died in the incident. A 25-year-old Libyan refugee has been arrested on a suspicion of murder. Germany's coronavirus infection rate has risen for a third day, lifted by local outbreaks, including at a slaughterhouse. The infection rate, known as the R number, has risen to 2.88, meaning each person with the virus is passing it on to at least 3 others. The country's death rate has also so far been relatively low at fewer than 9,000. And finally, the guitar Kurt Cobain played at Nirvana's historic MTV Unplugged concert has sold for a record $6 million at an auction house in Beverly Hills. Nirvana's acoustic performance in 1993 is now considered one of history's greatest live performances. Kurt Cobain died about 5 months after that appearance. The guitar will be displayed at a worldwide exhibition tour. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
I was already pretty much over Nirvana by the time they played the Unplugged concert.
I was pretty much just getting into them when they played the Unplugged concert. So maybe, I think that's just because you're a little bit older than me, Matt.
True. Yeah, I'm quite a bit older than you. Let's talk to someone who's even older than me right now.
Hey,
John Tucker is standing by.
Wait a second.
Getting ready for Daybreak Americas. John, what do you got planned?
Well, big day here in New York City. The next phase of reopening begins today. So we're going to have up to 300,000 workers returning to their jobs. Retail reopens with any number of restrictions. You also have bars and restaurants. They can now serve customers at outdoor tables, provided that you do have outdoor tables or the space. Meantime, coronavirus cases, they continue to climb in California, Arizona, and Florida. And we asked the question, what's the narrative that investors are latching onto today as some valuations reach, I guess I can say this, eye-watering levels? We're going to speak to Lori Calvasina at RBC Capital Markets. Also, Mike Wilson stops by. He's the chief U.S. equity strategist at Morgan Stanley. Also, examine, is there a reset for the Trump campaign after a weekend rally that was less than expected? Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter breaks down some of the top stories from the nation's capital. So I hope you can join myself and Nathan Hager in a matter of moments for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas.
You can count on it. I don't know if Nathan has told you, but lately,
yes,
I've been using my Bloomberg mobile app. You know, I used to always, in the U.S., I would always tune in on Sirius XM, and then when I moved out, I had to search for it on the internet when I wasn't home, when I wasn't in the office or home with my Bloomberg terminal. Now, I have realized, probably belatedly, there's a radio button on the mobile app. You can just click. Which is fantastic. So I look forward to it. John Tucker and Nathan Hager coming up. If you're listening on Sirius XM, if you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you will hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Matt, let's pick up on what John was saying there. He was talking about narratives that market participants tell themselves, and somebody else who's been giving narratives quite a little bit of thought, jumping off Robert Shiller's work, of course, on narrative economics, is Mark Haefele, CIO at UBS Wealth Management, and he joins us on the line right now. Mark, I think it's interesting. You summarise nicely the few narratives that could lead us from where we are right now, and it's just a question of which one prevails, I suppose. The Fed, there's the questions around the virus, and that's just naming two. Which of these narratives do you think are going to dominate?
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for that setup. And I think that over the medium term, investors really are going to have to focus on this Fed story and the amount of liquidity that has been put into the system. You know, the chairman of the Fed has never been, in my view, this explicit about their focus is going to be on supplying liquidity to the economy, even if that does mean that asset prices move too high. So I think Matt missed a trick when he made the Kurt Cobain guitar story a little bit about his interest. You know, $6 million for that guitar points in the direction of the liquidity in the system.
Well, I think $6 million, even with this liquidity, $6 million is a heck of a lot for a guitar, even if it is a 1959 Martin. Do you think, though, that we're seeing bubbles being blown up other places in the market than, Kurt Cobain's guitar auctions?
Well, I think the way that we would say it is that, you know, when you look at equity exposure, you do want to broaden out from, say, the S&P 500. I think we would prefer to go with global equities or mid-caps in the United States or some of the cyclicals that can start to rebound here, see what could catch up a little bit as that liquidity continues to flow.
And what do you make of second wave concerns, or is it the continuation of the first wave? There seems to be quite a lot of conversation about that, Mark. I mean, what do you make of these second wave concerns, though, and what response we'll see from governments to it? Because some investors tell us the bar for another lockdown like the first one is incredibly high, and therefore they assume that won't happen.
Right. So I think if you look at this Fed story as the medium-term narrative that's going to continue to be most important, you have this second wave story and also the U.S. election story, which generate headlines, on a daily basis, of course, and they're going to add volatility in. And I think that we've since the U.S. has started to open up, the fear of a second wave or growing first wave, has taken some of the wind out of some of the stocks on occasion. But for us, when we look at the data, we do think that the bar for anything like a national or even a statewide lockdown is very high now, because we've learned so much about this virus in terms of how it transmits, and some of this is certainly some of the concerns that we've seen about rising case counts. It is probably a mix of things, both opening up, and also wider testing. It also comes.
I've lost him. Have you lost him, Matt?
I was going to say we either lost Mark or we lost me, but now I hear Anna. So
somebody is lost. Well, we're both still here, so I guess that means that Mark must be lost. That is unfortunate, because I wanted to get on to talk about the U.S. election, because with all of this talk of, rightly we dwell on the virus and we talk about the Fed's response and fiscal responses, and we really haven't had much time to talk about the U.S. election, and it is only, in inverted commas, in November. And Mark was probably going to go on to talk about how the policy platforms are not yet clearly defined, which is something worth bearing in mind.
I also think it's interesting that he seemed a little bit more sanguine, and I think that markets, I get this vibe from markets as well. He seemed a little bit more sanguine about a second wave and a little bit more excited about the idea that central banks and fiscal measures are going to achieve the reflation that was evident to him in Kurt Cobain's guitar price.
Guitar prices, you were quite shocked by that. Bubbles there, perhaps. So he talks about second wave in Texas, Arizona, Florida, California, and Beijing, and Germany, and other places. It will be really interesting to compare the lockdown measures that are put in place as a result of these waves, compare them to the first wave, because things could look very different.
We should also point out that Mark Hefferle from UBS, and keep in mind, he's the chief investment officer at UBS Wealth Management. They have over $2 trillion in assets under management. So his say has a lot of sway. He's going on Bloomberg surveillance next. So if you're listening on London DAB, you'll hear him here. Otherwise, switch to TV.
At Honda, we believe in our ears. Listening can help solve some of life's biggest conundrums. For example, if a car breaks down and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is yes. The new Jazz Hybrid will pinpoint your location automatically and send for help at the tap of a button. And with its personal assistant, you can find the answers to other conundrums like, where is a good vegan gluten-free pizza place with free parking? The new Honda Jazz. Hybrid and connected. Honda. The power of dreams. Connectivity subscription available in selected grades.
It could be a first-timer or a long-timer or a once-in-a-whiler. It could be a little or a lot. It could be the ticket under your fridge magnet. It could be someone with your first name and last and middle. It could be you. This Saturday's £15 million Lotto jackpot must be won, or thousands of you will win a share of the jackpot. Play online or on the app. Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Can my employer change my contract?
Am I entitled to statutory sick pay?
What is holiday pay?
When can I take annual leave?
Is my employer allowed to change the hours I work?
How do I raise an issue with my employer?
Right now, it's important to know your rights in the workplace. At ACAS, we're here to help with free impartial advice. Visit us today at acas.org.uk/rights at work.
Come on the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Coronavirus cases continue to climb in California, Arizona, and Florida.
New York City enters phase 2, bringing up to 300,000 workers back to the streets.
China tightens its grip on Hong Kong with a push to directly prosecute residents of the city.
Stores, salons, and outdoor restaurants in the city reopen. A New York City police officer is suspended after using a chokehold on a man over the weekend. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
John Stashower in sports. Questions abound after many cases of athletes testing positive for the virus and an ugly racial incident involving NASCAR.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good morning, I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It's coming up to 501 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 31 points. Dow futures up 265. NASDAQ futures a gain of 93 points. The DAX in Germany, CAC in Paris, both up 0.3%. The 10-year's down 1/32, yield 0.69%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil little changed. It's at $39.75 a barrel. COMEX gold is higher by 0.5% or $8, $17.6110 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1224 against the dollar, and the yen at 106.93. John?
Yeah, Nathan, we're still seeing coronavirus infections rise in several parts of the country. In California, health officials report the state's highest one-day jump in cases. Here with the story is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
At least 4,500 new virus diagnoses were identified statewide since Saturday's figures were released. Coronavirus-related hospitalizations have risen by about 10% in California since June 11th. On Sunday, over 3,500 patients admitted to medical centers across the state with an infection. Now, Officer Sonia Angel attributed rising case counts to expanded access to diagnostic testing, as well as recent reopening procedures. She says it was expected and they are prepared to handle it. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, Ed. Infections also continue climbing in Florida, where Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez also blames the rise on increased testing.
I want to be clear, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a spike in the number of people that are sick. A lot of these cases that we're detecting are asymptomatic.
In Arizona, cases also climbed over the weekend. Overall in the U.S., infections rose 1.6% in Saturday's data. That's the biggest jump this month.
And the government appears to lack a clear plan to stem the spread of the virus. That's according to Michael Osterholm, the director of the University of Minnesota's Center for Infectious Disease Research.
We're at 70% of the number of cases today that we were at the very height of the pandemic cases in early April. And yet I don't see any kind of this is where we need to go and this is what we need to do to get there kind of effort. And that's one of our challenges.
Without coordinated action, Osterholm expects to see a forest fire of cases. He spoke on NBC's Meet the Press, heard right here on Bloomberg Radio.
You have to basically stay locked down. You have to limit transmission in areas that we're not doing. And that's what I think you're seeing right now is this increases in a number of states because everybody's back to a pre-pandemic mindset.
Osterholm says he doesn't see the outbreak slowing this summer or by year's end. The total deaths in the U.S. now number nearly 120,000.
In the meantime, New York City takes its next step in the reopening process today. Phase 2 allows for outdoor dining, haircuts, and in-store shopping, along with face masks and social distancing. Rising infections in Florida, California, and Arizona offer a cautionary tale for New York officials. We spoke with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul.
We're continuing to ask people to follow the social distancing, wear the mask, and we won't end up like the other states. They're literally putting a halt order on some of the reopenings, and that's psychologically devastating, and it's horrible for the economy.
Estimates call for 150 to 300,000 workers coming back to New York City. Corporate offices are allowed to reopen, though many firms are keeping employees home for now. J.P. Morgan starts returning staff to Manhattan trading floors today, beginning at around 20% capacity.
Shifting gears now, we have movement in Beijing on that new national security law targeting Hong Kong. Details of the bill were released over the weekend, showing China will have the right to prosecute residents for vaguely defined offenses. Here with more is Bloomberg's Yvonne Mann in Hong Kong.
The central government will have jurisdiction over a, quote, extremely small number of national security cases, and China will establish a new bureau in Hong Kong to analyze the security situation, collect intelligence, and lawfully handle national security cases. And this has been a direct challenge to the autonomy of Hong Kong, and the imposition of this national security law shows that Beijing will circumvent what legal system that Hong Kong has.
Well, China says the new law is needed to fight terrorism, subversion, and collusion. Activists in Hong Kong say similar legislation in the mainland is used to jail journalists, human rights lawyers, religious leaders, and dissidents.
Well, we're seeing a mixed picture in equity markets this morning. In Asia, stocks in Hong Kong led modest declines overnight. Here with more on the price action in the region is Bloomberg's Juliette Sally from Singapore.
Japan's Nikkei 225 index fell 0.2% as the yen held fairly steady at 106.9. China's CSI 300 closed modestly higher, while the offshore yuan was steady after the PBOC left the loan prime rates unchanged in June. Stocks in Hong Kong dropped, the Hang Seng down as much as 1% in the afternoon session after China confirmed over the weekend that a proposed national security law would allow it to override Hong Kong's independent legal system. In Singapore, Juliette Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliette, thanks. U.S. futures are gaining. Treasury yields little change, and volatility remains high with the VIX right now at 34. Sheila Patel is the co-chair of investment banking at Goldman Sachs.
You know, it's a time to look at the long-term opportunity set in the equity markets. I think fixed income is extremely difficult.
And we spoke with Sheila Patel overnight at the Bloomberg Invest Global Conference in Asia. Tune in for the U.S. portion of that event today, including an interview with Bill Ackman. The Pershing Square CEO sits down for a conversation with David Rubenstein at 2:30 p.m. Wall Street time. And as we look at U.S. futures right now, solidly in the green, it's risk on today. Dow futures up 310 points. That's a rise of 1.2%. S&P futures, they're up 35 points, up 1.2%. NASDAQ E-mini futures up 1%, up 105 points. This is Bloomberg. And it's now 5:07 on Wall Street. Time for news from around the world. And we say good morning to Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Good morning, John. New York City marks a milestone today, rebounding from the nation's deadliest coronavirus outbreak. For the first time in 3 months, starting today, New Yorkers will be able to get haircuts, take their kids to playgrounds, and Mayor Bill de Blasio says, dine out at area restaurants.
The idea is to bring the customers back, bring their livelihoods of the people who work there back, bring the money back in to keep the restaurants going.
New York City enters phase 2 of its reopening plan today. The Mid-Hudson region is on track to enter phase 3 tomorrow. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said yesterday less than 1% of people in the state of New York have tested positive for the virus. But the New York Times reports only 35% of New Yorkers who tested positive are providing that information to contact tracers about their close contacts. New Jersey places of worship are gradually reopening. Face coverings are required. Worshipers must remain 6 feet apart. A New York City police officer is suspended after he was recorded placing a man in a now illegal chokehold until he passed out. New York City Police Commissioner Dermot Shea calls that incident disturbing. Former National Security Advisor for President Trump, John Bolton, tells ABC News in an exclusive interview that President Trump consistently put his re-election prospects ahead of the national interest. Bolton says failed negotiations with North Korea only made things much worse for the U.S.
The threat from North Korea today is absolutely greater because while all these photo opportunities were taking place, there's absolutely no doubt that North Korea's work on both its nuclear and ballistic missile programs continued.
President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, says this is Bolton's pattern of behavior.
When he worked in the Bush administration, he pushed and pushed for this Dr. Strangelove agenda. And when he didn't get his way, he left the administration. What did he do? He wrote a tell-all book.
The White House dismisses Bolton's claims. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Amy, thanks. It's coming up on 5:10 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. And good Monday morning, John Stashower.
All right, good morning, John. Forget the golf or the Belmont. The big story of the weekend, the number of athletes who tested positive for the virus. Nick Watney playing the PGA event at Hilton Head, tested negative on Tuesday, but positive 3 days later. Grigor Dimitrov, top 20 tennis player who was playing a Novak Djokovic-led event in Croatia that took no COVID-related precautions. 40 baseball players and officials at team facilities in Florida and Arizona, including 4 Yankees officials, 11 hockey players, including Toronto's young star Austin Matthews, 23 Clemson football players, 30 more from LSU quarantined due to COVID concerns, all leading to the same question: should sports be played? They did finish the Heritage Golf despite a lengthy rain delay. American Webb Simpson shot 64, finished 22 under par, won by 1 shot. They did not race at Talladega due to rain. They will today. For the first time, 5,000 fans will be let in. Some showed up yesterday before the postponement, and the Confederate flag, just banned by NASCAR, was seen even in a flyover. Even worse came word that a noose was found in the garage of NASCAR's only African-American driver, Bubba Wallace, who called the incident despicable. NASCAR said it can't state strongly enough how serious it takes this heinous act. Still no resolution of the baseball labor dispute. The owners not budging off playing 60 games. The players wanted 70. The union vote that was to take place yesterday was postponed after Commissioner Rob Manfred made some tweaks that favor the players in 2021 in case there's a further stoppage this year due to the virus. But Manfred stressed the importance of something definitive done soon. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. It is now 5:11 on Wall Street. And as we look at futures this morning, Dow futures up 294 points, a rise of 1.2% this morning. And the NASDAQ E-mini futures, they are up 1%, up 104 points this morning. And our weekly look at we have in the world of sports, a college baseball champion would have been crowned with the best of 3 series in Omaha, Nebraska. And the NBA draft also scheduled for Thursday night in Brooklyn. That's been pushed to October. You're listening to Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
The Mini Electric was raring to go until ready, set, stop. We hit the power down switch. We waited. But now it's time to start up again. We're ready with the Mini Electric and whole Mini range online. Showroom safety measures are set, and we're feeling good to go. Find your perfect Mini at mini.co.uk.
Life isn't always easy at the moment. We can feel frustrated, miss loved ones, or get anxious. But there are simple things we can all do to look after our mental well-being at this time. Every Mind Matters will get you started with personalised tips and advice from the NHS. Whether it's dealing with stress, techniques to help you relax, or simple tips for better sleep, we'll help you find what's right for you. Search Every Mind Matters today.
Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
For a look at the global and Asian economies as they weather the pandemic, we turn to Oxford Economics Chief Australia economist Sarah Hunter. There's been the argument that in Asia we'll see a quicker recovery because a lot of these economies were either sort of first in and first out of the pandemic. But how meaningful are these individual domestic recoveries when we don't have open borders for tourism, for the services sector to be able to really recover?
To some extent, it does matter because domestic demand is crucial for all economies. But you're right, the openness of Asia and Asia's reliance on global trade is a very important part of what drives the outlook overall. And it isn't going to be possible for there to be a complete recovery in any open economy before the rest of the world is able to get back to normal. New Zealand is probably a really good example of that. So their economy, they've obviously removed completely now domestic restrictions. They've managed to eliminate the virus at home, but until they can fully open their borders and allow the tourists back in, who are such an important part of their economy, it's going to be impossible for them to recover completely. So yes, that does really matter. But having said that, there are going to be differences in terms of how economies come through, and some will be more impacted than others.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. European stocks are gaining some ground now. U.S. equity futures are rallying as investors bet the economic recovery keeps going even as virus infection rates rise. Gold approached its highest level since 2012. Treasuries and the dollar a little changed. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. On Bloomberg, S&P futures are up 1.1%, up 34 points. Dow futures, gain of 298 points. That's a gain of 1.2%. NASDAQ futures are higher by 105 points, 1.1% higher. 10-year Treasury down 1/32nd, yield 0.69%. 2-year yield 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil is little changed at $39.75 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5%, up $8.80, $17.61.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1222 against the dollar. The yen is at 106.93. At 8:30 Wall Street time this morning, we get the National Activity Index from the Chicago Fed. Then at 10, it's existing home sales for the month of May. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan. Coronavirus cases are on the rise in California, Florida, Arizona, but the numbers continue to go down in New York, and New York City enters phase 2 of reopening today. That includes outdoor dining, salon services, and reopened playgrounds with some restrictions. A New York City police officer is suspended without pay after he was recorded using a chokehold on a man until he passed out. Police Commissioner Dermot Shea says an investigation is underway. And NASCAR is investigating who placed a noose in the garage stall of Bubba Wallace, NASCAR's only black driver. NASCAR says it will find the person responsible and eliminate that person from the sport. Wallace says he continues to stand proud for what he believes in. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thank you. And with stock futures firmly in the green this Monday morning, time to bring in our first guest this morning. Lori Calvasina is head of U.S. equity strategy at RBC Capital Markets. Lori, good to talk to you. And what's the narrative you suppose that investors are latching onto lately?
You know, it's an interesting morning. We saw some weakness late Friday. There were some concerns about retail closures that emerged again. I think the market is really just kind of lurching from headlines day to day. Of course, we've got the reopening accelerated in New York City today, so I suspect that's generating some excitement and just the general refocusing on the economy at the moment.
My eyes start to water up when I look at some of the valuations. It's getting kind of lofty, is it not?
I'm right there with you. I mean, when we look at the price versus next year's earnings, and we look at our own estimate, I mean, we've been trading around 26 times. It's not that much lower if you look at the consensus numbers. I'm sorry, that's the 2020 number, and it's still well above 20 if you look at next year's numbers. So, you know, we think that the Fed has put a floor under the market here. We think the Fed has helped goose the valuations. Even accounting for that, it still looks extremely expensive to me, and we do feel like when you get expensive valuations, you're right for bad news.
But the Powell put, whatever you want to call it, that's not going away anytime soon.
It's not going away, but, you know, what's interesting to us is that when we look at the degree of expansion that we've seen in the multiple so far, it's already within range of what we saw during prior QE periods after the financial crisis. So we think the Fed has helped to get us here, and frankly, I think the Fed has done a lot of the heavy lifting to get us here in terms of market valuations and market performance. But the question is, do we repeat everything that we just saw? And based on the historical data, I don't think there's really a case for that.
I've got a graph here on the screen of the SPX from the March low to where we closed on Friday, up over 38%. Did that follow the usual script of that rise from the bottom?
You know, what's interesting is we feel like this rally has been on fast forward. If you look at the market drawdown, it happened very, very quickly. But the average drop in the S&P in that drawdown was actually in line with what you typically see in just a recession going back all the way to the 1930s. And if you look at the rebound that we've had, if you actually look at that June 8th high in the market, it's pretty much in line with the average within the 6-month period that you saw in the bottom of the market, you know, just kind of coming off of the last 3 recession lows. So it's been a very textbook rally, but it has happened just over a much, much quicker time frame than what we've seen historically.
We're not going to retest that low, are we?
I'm leaning towards the idea that we won't. If we had talked a couple months ago, I would have told you there was a pretty good chance, but I think the market has spoken for itself at this point in time. And look, if the narrative that the recession is ending soon and that these positive inflections in some of the economic data points that we've seen does continue, putting in a bottom around March 23rd actually makes sense. If you go back and you look historically, it's somewhere between 4 and 6 months before the recession is over is when the market tends to put in a bottom. So if this sort of ending of the economic downturn narrative holds up, it's a natural place to put a bottom.
Well, let's talk about where investors should be putting their money right now. In what sectors, individual sectors right now?
So the three that we continue to talk to investors about are utilities, healthcare, and industrials. And generally what we've told people is keep a balance between cyclicality, defense, and longer-term secular growth. On the longer-term secular growth side, that's where healthcare comes into play. We actually think you've got much better valuations than what you've got on the tech side. And we do think the economic backdrop won't be rip-roaring once we kind of move to the new normal in this economy. Industrials, we think, is your best way to sort of get cyclical rebound exposure. Very, very undervalued sector, very friendly in terms of ESG portfolios. ESG funds tend to overweight that sector. That's a trend that's not going away. And utilities is kind of our defensive take just in case things get volatile again, which we think is more likely than not. And it's actually got a pretty good valuation story relative to things like staples and REITs. And technology has been treated as a defensive proxy, but we actually think the valuations are a little bit stretched there right now.
Okay. Small versus large cap. Is that an even mix there, or how does that break down?
Sure. So, I think the bias among sort of my peer group and the strategy community has been to be underweight small caps. We've actually been a little bit more constructive there, and we've said take a neutral view between small and large. It's too late to be underweight, and certainly we've seen that space in the market really take off since mid-May. I think that small caps, you just really have to understand how they function in the market today. As long as the economic data points are improving, small cap is going to outperform large cap, and we are at historic valuation lows in small relative to large. Yeah. But small caps do look expensive in absolute terms, and if we start to see the rally take a breather, they're going to get hit hard. If you can be a 5-year investor, buy them.
Lori, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Lori Calvasina, head of U.S. Equity Strategy at RBC Capital Markets, with us this morning. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. Just ahead, our top stories.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Futures point to a higher open on this Monday. Still, the mood remains vulnerable to any sign of setbacks as governments gradually ease coronavirus lockdowns and travel restrictions. California reported record new cases, and Florida infections jumped more than the weekly average. Stocks closed lower Friday, with the Dow losing almost 1% and the S&P 500 down about 0.6%. The Nasdaq was flat to higher, but overall the market had a positive week, rising almost 2%. Today we get a look at the housing market with the May report on existing home sales. Those numbers are expected to show a big improvement from the month of April, but still show a decline of 5.6%. The Chicago Fed releases its National Activity Index that also looks at May. Futures on the Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P all up about 1% this morning. Overseas, European markets were narrowly mixed. Asian markets fell today. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving.
This is a message from the government. Some businesses are now able to welcome back their employees and customers. To keep everyone safe,
it's important you follow government guidance and make your workplace COVID secure. Businesses should carry out COVID-19 risk assessments, put in place hygiene procedures, and help staff and customers keep a safe distance. Talk to your employees, listen to their concerns, and if possible, help them to work from home. Every workplace is different, but by following this guidance, you can get back to business safely and play your part in managing the risk of infection. Visit gov.uk/working safely for more information. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining despite coronavirus infections climbing in several parts of the country. In Florida, officials are blaming rising cases on increased testing. Jeanette Nunez is lieutenant governor of the state.
You need to take precautions. This virus is still amongst us. There's no vaccine. There's no cure right now.
And in Arizona, cases also climbed over the weekend. Officials in California reported the state's highest one-day jump in cases.
And without coordinated action, this trend could continue. That's according to Michael Osterholm, director of the University of Minnesota's Center for Infectious Disease Research.
I don't see this slowing down through the summer or into the fall. I don't think we're going to see 1, 2, and 3 waves. I think we're going to just see one very, very difficult forest fire of cases.
Osterholm says the government lacks a clear plan to stem the spread of the virus. He spoke on NBC's Meet the Press, heard right here on Bloomberg Radio.
And shifting gears now, we have movement in Beijing on that new national security law targeting Hong Kong. China's moving quickly to implement the measure, which will enable a government to override the city's independent legal system. Here with more is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
This could happen as soon as next week. Xinhua said the central government would only have jurisdiction over a small number of cases, but critics are clearly concerned it will go much further. China will establish a new bureau in Hong Kong to analyze security and collect intelligence. The chief executive will oversee a new committee to protect national security, and she'll appoint judges to handle the cases. The Bar Association expressed alarm. It said, well, that's like picking a judge for a contest in which you have an interest. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And in corporate news, the wild ride continues for Wirecard. Shares of the company are down another 32% in Germany. That's after it admitted it's missing $2 billion, likely doesn't exist. The payments processor is talking with creditors and considering a full-scale restructuring after pulling its financial results for the past year and a half. So far, Wirecard has lost more than 80% of its value. As for the broader market, it is risk on this Monday morning. S&P futures are up 33 points. Dow futures up 276. NASDAQ futures up 103 points. The DAX in Germany up 0.4%. So is the CAC in Paris. 10-year Treasury little changed. It's at 0.69%. The 2-year at 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil little changed. $39.75 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5% or $8.20. $17.6120 an ounce. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
And it is now 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's get news from around the world this morning. And we say good morning to Amy Morris.
Good morning, John. New York City takes the next step in the reopening process, launching Phase 2 today. That allows for haircuts, in-store shopping, and outdoor dining with some restrictions like face masks and social distancing. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer wants to see outdoor seating, allowing pedestrians to pass through.
Hopefully, we want more open streets, and we want them to be able to go into the street to be able to put up their tables and chairs.
New York City is set to open Phase 2 today. The Mid-Hudson region on track to enter Phase 3 tomorrow. The effort to stop the spread of coronavirus through contact tracing is being hampered by those who simply don't want to provide that information to tracers. The New York Times reports only 35% of city residents who tested positive gave that information about their close contacts. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said yesterday less than 1% of people in the state of New York tested positive for the virus. And New Jersey places of worship are gradually reopening. Face coverings are required. Worshipers still have to stay 6 feet apart. A New York City police officer is suspended without pay after he was recorded using a chokehold on a man in Queens. Police commissioner says they are investigating, but that suspending the officer right away was necessary. The American Museum of Natural History is removing a statue of Theodore Roosevelt. It features Roosevelt on horseback with an African man and a Native American man on each side. Critics say it symbolizes colonial expansion and racial discrimination. Getting a better idea now of why President Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, left that position. He tells ABC News about the moment he decided to resign.
What was the last straw for you?
The negotiations with the Taliban and the decision to bring Taliban to Camp David.
President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, dismissed any claims from Bolton's tell-all.
This is just rinse and repeat. This is John Bolton's pattern of behavior.
He says Bolton did the same thing when he left the Bush administration. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. It is coming up 5:36 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashower.
All right, good morning, John. All across the sports world right now, coronavirus concerns. The NBA getting ready to head to Orlando to restart the season despite Florida having record highs in cases. Baseball teams having to leave team facilities in Florida and Arizona after several teams, including the Yankees and Tampa, reported positive tests. Among the athletes testing positive, Austin Matthews, the Toronto Maple Leafs young star, top 20 tennis player Grigor Dimitrov, and pro golfer Nick Watney, who was playing the tournament at Hilton Head, the one that was won yesterday by American Webb Simpson. Rain forced NASCAR to postpone until today the race at Talladega, where there was an ugly incident. Somebody put a noose in the garage of NASCAR's only black driver, Bubba Wallace, who had led the call for the sport to stop allowing Confederate flags to fly at races. Baseball players were supposed to vote yesterday on whether to accept the owner's offer of a 60-game season, but with the recent outbreaks of COVID cases, it was postponed. The feeling is they would now have to push back the start of the season a week until July 26th. If the players vote no, Commissioner Rob Manfred can impose a schedule of even fewer games, but the union would then retain the right to file a labor grievance. Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott will today sign his franchise tag contract. He'll make over $31 million in 2020. The two sides have until mid-July to get together on a long-term deal. Former Dolphins running back Jim Kick has died at 73. He was part of Miami's undefeated team in 1972. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John?
John, thanks a lot. 5:37 on Wall Street. It's time now for the Tri-State Business Report. With that, here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Facebook is considering taking over Neiman Marcus retail space at Hudson Yards in Manhattan. That's according to Women's Wear Daily. Neiman Marcus filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy May 7th, which would allow it to back out of its 188,000 square foot store lease free of penalties. New Jersey salons, barbershops, and other personal care services are permitted to reopen today with a lot of new safety measures and protocols in place. The state's entering stage 2 of its reopening schedule amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Personal care services have been closed since mid-March. With a move underway to save Stamford's only public ice rink by privatizing it, representatives are considering a different plan. The Advocate reports it would mean substantial fee increases. The Board of Representatives Parks and Recreation Committee approved the plan for Terry Connor's ice rink in Cove Island Park. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Ed, thanks. 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. And let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WGY in Albany, I'm reporting the parent of New York & Company is preparing to file for bankruptcy.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WFLA in Orlando, I'm talking about home mortgage delinquencies in May climbing to the highest level since late 2011.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on WFLA in Tampa Bay, we're talking about Apple closing some Florida stores after a coronavirus spike.
I'm Roger Hearing. On Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London, we're reporting on the Prime Minister leading cabinet discussions on further major easing of the lockdown.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. Deloitte said almost a third of shale producers are technically insolvent.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Detroit automakers are gearing up for full production.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Another story we're watching, Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference getting underway today with a major change likely in store for its Mac computers. Details from Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Apple is expected to announce a switch from Intel chips to its own for the computer's main processors. Bloomberg Intelligence says the change may save Apple as much as $80 per machine and bring it closer to converging the features of the Mac with iOS devices like the iPhone and iPad. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
And some other stories we're following for you. American Airlines boosting its balance sheet with $3.5 billion in new financing. The carrier had previously relied on federal aid for liquidity during the pandemic. Now American is selling $750 million of shares and the same amount of senior convertible notes. It's also offering $1.5 billion in secured notes and will take out a $500 million loan. Well, the pandemic apparently is taking its toll on American homeowners. Home mortgage delinquencies, they climbed last month to the highest level since 2011. The number of borrowers more than 30 days late rising by more than 700,000. This according to property information service Black Knight. And you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment,
where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing, so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a computer or to someone called Colin or Sean or Luth or Ange or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hi, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Talk on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Police say a shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina has left 2 people dead and 7 others wounded. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Deputy Chief Johnny Jennings says 5 others were hit by vehicles after the shooting and said there was evidence of multiple shooters. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton's memoir is out tomorrow. Bolton answered questions about the book's content and how history will view President Trump.
I hope it will remember him as a one-term president who didn't plunge the country irretrievably into a downward spiral we can't recall from. We can get over one term. 2 terms I'm more troubled about. Decisions are made in a very scattershot fashion, especially in the potentially mortal field of national security policy.
That from an interview with John Bolton on ABC News. I'm John Troutz.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. This update is brought to you by SEI. Crises bring out the best in people. Character, community, partnership. Together as one. SEI. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. Stocks look poised to extend last week's rally as investors bet on the strength of the economic recovery despite rising virus infection rates. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are higher by 31 points right now. Dow futures up 245. NASDAQ futures a gain of almost 100 points. The DAX in Germany, CAC in Paris, both up 0.2%. 10-year little change. The yield on a 10-year note, 0.69%. 2-year Treasury yield, 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.25%, down 10 cents to $39.65 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.5%, up $8.80, $17.6170 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1218 against the dollar. The yen at 106.93. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy?
Nathan, we continue to track coronavirus cases as some states still see some surges happening. California, Florida, Arizona, all watching caseloads climb. And in Florida, officials are blaming the rise on increased testing. New York City entering phase 2 of its reopening plan today, which means outdoor dining, salon services, in-store shopping are all allowed, and kids are back on the playgrounds. All with some restrictions, of course, like masks and social distancing. President Trump tells Fox he'll be announcing new curbs on employment-based visas today. That may affect about 240,000 people. He's also urging Republicans to oppose a Democratic policing bill set for a House vote on Thursday. He'll be speaking in Arizona tomorrow and then in Wisconsin on Thursday. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. It's 5:49 on Wall Street. Let's find out more about the Phase 2 reopening in New York City this morning and bring in Bloomberg's Jenny Serrain, who's been writing about this and tracking it. Jenny, what does Phase 2 reopening mean?
Well, it means that we're going to see a little bit more life back in the city. So I think the thing folks really are excited about is the opening up of restaurants for outdoor dining. So you'll finally be able to stop doing takeout and actually go and sit somewhere. But beyond that, we'll also see hair salons and barbershops allowed to reopen. Playgrounds will reopen. And office jobs actually are also allowed to reopen. So quite a bit of categories in this next phase, but definitely all with, the restrictions of you'll want to continue wearing your mask, you'll want to continue social distancing.
Let's talk about those office workers. How many office workers are coming back, and does it, the city and the state may give the okay, but ultimately I imagine it's up to the individual employer.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely up to the individual employer, and I think most of the companies we've talked to and heard from seem to still believe in this slow and steady return to the office life. A lot of employers are having to make a big investment in their office space to make sure that they're, encouraging employees to maintain that proper social distance. So you'll start to see plexiglass in between desks. You'll see stickers on the ground kind of guiding you into the building and making sure that you aren't overcrowding elevators and things like that. So offices, while they're allowed to reopen, probably it's definitely based on the employer and probably will just be super slow to return.
Yeah, and how are those employees going to get to work?
Yeah, that's another big question. I think, the subway, for what it's worth, has never been cleaner than it is right now. The MTA is just deploying workers overnight, every night to this day, really trying to get those train cars clean. But definitely that's still kind of the outstanding issue in terms of bringing folks back.
Hey, do we have any sense of who's still left? I mean, we're reopening restaurants and bars, provided they have outdoor space for the tables. But maybe an unfair question to you, but are they all coming back at this point? Or do we know how many acts shut down and will stay shut down have been closed permanently as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's probably two camps. I think for de Blasio, Mayor Bill de Blasio said that this effort to, encourage outdoor dining, that should help save about 5,000 restaurants.
So they're hoping that kind of prevents a lot of places from going under permanently. A lot of the restaurants we talked to also said, outdoor dining is great, but I still think a huge part of my business is going to be takeout. I'm not even sure it'll be worth it to open for, just such limited seating that you can offer outside. So a lot of restaurants have actually told us too, I don't know that I'm going to go that route, just because it can mess up their takeout business. If you've got people on the sidewalk, you can't let as many delivery workers come and take away orders and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of considerations still outstanding, but Mayor Bill de Blasio is hoping that this does move to help, about 5,000 restaurants avoid permanent closure.
Have you been able to get a handle on people's attitudes toward dining out, going to bars and restaurants? I mean, is it going to be, if it's not fun, I don't want to go out to a bar or a restaurant if somebody's going to be constantly telling me I can't stand there, I can't do that. It sounds like a stressful experience, right?
Yeah, it's a So I think, one thing to remember, I guess, as we enter into this next stage is anywhere you go, you won't be able to just sit and wait around. So if you don't make an appointment and you just walk into your salon or barber shop and they don't have any available chairs, you won't be able to wait. Same goes for restaurants. So if you don't make a reservation and you get there and they don't have any tables available, you won't be able to wait. So I think that's one kind of interesting aspect of all of this, is that waiting culture is not the thing quite yet, but certainly I think it'll be interesting to see how consumers react to this reopening, if they'll kind of come along for the ride. I think we've heard from both camps, like people who are just longing for some return to normalcy. You might see those guys in that first wave of people trying out al fresco dining, but certainly there's still some who feel a little uneasy and a little unsure. One thing the city really recommends is, while you're at, dining outside, still have your mask on unless you're eating or drinking something. So, definitely the city is encouraging proper safety measures, but it will be interesting to see how consumers react.
Jenny, a pleasure. Appreciate it. Again, New York City, next phase of reopening beginning today. Among other things, up to 300,000 workers returning. Retail reopening with restrictions. Bars and restaurants, as Jenny mentioned there, now have to serve customers at outdoor tables. Nathan.
Okay, John, thank you. It is now 5:54 on Wall Street. Time for our Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The Department of Labor weighed in on its ongoing litigation with Oracle, saying companies that don't want to be subject to anti-bias enforcement by the agency's contractor watchdog should not enter into contracts with the government. A federal judge in California rejected calls for a nationwide freeze on narrower protections for wetlands and waterways, but another judge has frozen the federal rule in Colorado. Healthcare and social assistance workers accounted for 37% of COVID-19 cases in Washington state in the only analysis to look at the risks for occupations and industries.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. The Supreme Court has upheld a crucial permit for Dominion Energy's planned $8 billion Atlantic Coast pipeline. The move allows the natural gas line to cross under the Appalachian Trail. But there are still legal obstacles ahead. For more on the decision, Bloomberg's June Grosso speaks to Pat Parento, an environmental law professor at Vermont Law School.
How big a win is this for energy companies fighting to expand pipelines and fossil fuel use?
Well, it's one step. It's not a big win. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline itself is facing 4 different legal claims against it under the Endangered Species Act. There's an environmental justice claim against one of the compressors that's needed. There's a NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act case. So there's a bunch of hurdles for this particular pipeline, but it certainly does eliminate what could have been a real obstacle.
Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion, and he said, at bottom, these cases boil down to a simple proposition. A trail is a trail, and land is land. Unwind that for me.
He's trying to simplify the case by saying these are 2 different things, or at least legally, they're 2 different things. Land is something that has to be occupied, possessed, whereas a trail is just something you use by permission. Sotomayor, in dissent, said, I think it's equally simple. there's another law that says that this trail is a unit of the national park system. And the act that governs the national park system defines unit to mean any land on which the trail is located. So Sotomayor did the same thing as Justice Thomas, and I think the answer is straightforward here as well. A trail is land. It's a path worn in the land.
Parento speaking to Bloomberg's June Grosso. You can catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by listening to the Bloomberg Law Show at 10 p.m. Wall Street time or subscribing to the Bloomberg Law podcast. Attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. U.S. stock futures in the green, but giving back some of their gains now with S&P futures up 29 points, Dow futures up 228, NASDAQ futures higher by 93 points. European stocks now little changed to higher. 10-year little changed as well. The yield 0.69%, two-year Treasury yield 0.18%, and the 30-year yield 1.46%. Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not book an MOT to get you safely back on the road? With over 600,000 carried out every year at 350 garages, you can always count on our experts. And get back to visiting those you've missed the most.
Hi, Mum.
From a safe distance, of course. From MOTs to battery replacements and tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
At Honda, we've never looked to other car companies for inspiration. No, it's not a matter of an inflated ego. We just prefer listening to what people really need. For example, the new Honda Jazz Hybrid doesn't have the expected 6 airbags. It has 10, including one that prevents the driver and passenger from colliding with each other. And because we also listen to our conscience, all our safety features come as standard. No charge. Honda, the power of dreams.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Coronavirus cases continue to climb in California, Arizona, and Florida.
New York City enters phase 2, bringing up to 300,000 workers back to the streets.
China tightens its grip on Hong Kong with a push to directly prosecute residents of the city.
Stores, salons, and outdoor restaurants in the city reopen. A New York City police officer is suspended after using a chokehold on a man over the weekend. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
John's Dash Hour in Sports. Questions abound after many cases of athletes testing positive for the virus and an ugly racial incident involving NASCAR.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good morning, I'm John Tucker.
I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It's coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 28 points, Dow futures a gain of 225, NASDAQ futures up 91 points. European indices little changed at the moment. The Nikkei in Japan closed lower by 0.2%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.5%. 10-year Treasury little changed. The yield there 0.69%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.18%. 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.7%, down 28 cents, $39.47 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5%, up $9.80, $17.6280 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1212 against the dollar. The yen at 106.92. John?
And Nathan, we're still seeing coronavirus infections rise in several parts of the country. In California, health officials report the state's highest one-day jump in cases. And here with the story is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
At least 4,500 new virus diagnoses were identified statewide since Saturday's figures were released. Coronavirus-related hospitalizations have risen by about 10% in California since June 11th. On Sunday, over 3,500 patients admitted to medical centers across the state with an infection. Now, Officer Sonia Angel attributed rising case counts to expanded access to diagnostic testing, as well as recent reopening procedures. She says it was expected and they are prepared to handle it. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Ed, thank you. Infections also continue climbing in Florida, where Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez also blames the rise on increased testing.
I want to be clear, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a spike in the number of people that are sick. A lot of these cases that we're detecting are asymptomatic.
In Arizona, cases also climbed over the weekend. Also, overall in the U.S., infections rose 1.6% in Saturday's data. That is the biggest jump this month.
The government appears to lack a clear plan to stem the spread of the virus. That's according to Michael Osterholm, the director of the University of Minnesota's Center for Infectious Disease Research.
We're at 70% of the number of cases today that we were at the very height of the pandemic cases in early April. And yet I don't see any kind of this is where we need to go and this is what we need to do to get there kind of effort. And that's one of our challenges.
Without coordinated action, Osterholm expects to see a forest fire of cases. He spoke on the NBC's Meet the Press, heard right here on Bloomberg Radio.
You have to basically stay locked down. You have to limit transmission in areas that we're not doing. And that's what I think you're seeing right now is this increases in a number of states because everybody's back to a pre-pandemic mindset.
Osterholm says he doesn't see the outbreak slowing this summer or by year's end. Total deaths in the U.S. now number 120,000.
In the meantime, New York City takes its next step in the reopening process today. Phase 2 allows for outdoor dining, haircuts, and in-store shopping, along with face masks and social distancing. Rising infections in Florida, California, and Arizona offer a cautionary tale for New York officials. We spoke with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul.
We're continuing to ask people to follow the social distancing, wear the mask, and we won't end up like the other states. They're literally putting a halt order on some of the reopenings, and that's psychologically devastating, and it's horrible for the economy.
Estimates call for 150 to 300,000 workers coming back to New York City. Corporate offices are allowed to reopen, though many firms are keeping employees home for now. J.P. Morgan starts returning staff to Manhattan trading floors today, beginning at around 20% capacity.
And shifting gears now, we have movement in Beijing on that new national security law targeting Hong Kong. Details of the bill were released over the weekend, showing China will have the right to prosecute residents for vaguely defined offenses. Here with more is Bloomberg's Yvonne Mann in Hong Kong.
The central government will have jurisdiction over a, quote, extremely small number of national security cases, and China will establish a new bureau in Hong Kong to analyze the security situation, collect intelligence, and lawfully handle national security cases. And this has been a direct challenge to the autonomy of Hong Kong, and the imposition of this national security law shows that Beijing will circumvent what legal system that Hong Kong has.
China says the new law is intended to fight terrorism, subversion, and collusion. Activists in Hong Kong say similar legislation in the mainland is used to jail journalists, jail human rights lawyers, religious leaders, and dissidents.
Well, we're seeing a mixed picture in equity markets this morning. In Asia, stocks in Hong Kong led modest declines overnight. Here with more on the price action in the region is Bloomberg's Juliette Sally from Singapore.
Japan's Nikkei 225 index fell 0.2% as the yen held fairly steady at 106.9. China's CSI 300 closed modestly higher, while the offshore yuan was steady after the PBOC left the loan prime rates unchanged in June. Stocks in Hong Kong dropped, the Hang Seng down as much as 1% in the afternoon session after China confirmed over the weekend that a proposed national security law would allow it to override Hong Kong's independent legal system. In Singapore, Juliette Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliette, thanks. U.S. futures futures, they're gaining this morning. Treasury yields, they're little change, and volatility remains high with the VIX at over 34. Sheila Patel is co-chair of investment banking at Goldman Sachs.
It's a time to look at the long-term opportunity set in the equity markets. I think fixed income is extremely difficult.
We spoke with Sheila Patel overnight at the Bloomberg Invest Global Conference in Asia. And tune in for the U.S. portion of the event today, including an interview with Bill Ackman. The Pershing Square CEO sits down for a conversation with David Rubenstein at 2:30 p.m. Wall Street time. Green on the screen this morning ahead of the cash open on Wall Street. S&P futures, they are up 28 points. Dow futures up 226 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. It's now 6:07 on Wall Street, and it's time for news from around the world this morning. And we say good morning to Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Good morning, John. New York City marks a milestone today, rebounding from the nation's deadliest coronavirus outbreak. And for the first time in 3 months, starting today, New Yorkers will be able to get haircuts, take their kids to playgrounds. Mayor Bill de Blasio says you can dine out at area restaurants.
The idea is to bring the customers back, bring their livelihoods of the people who work there back, bring the money back in to keep the restaurants going.
New York City entering phase 2 of its reopening plan today. The Mid-Hudson region is on track to enter phase 3 tomorrow. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said yesterday that less than 1% of people in the state of New York tested positive for the virus. The New York Times is reporting only 35% of New Yorkers who tested positive are providing information to contact tracers about their close contacts. New Jersey places of worship are also gradually reopening. Face coverings are required and worshipers must remain 6 feet apart. A New York City police officer is suspended after he was recorded placing a man in a now illegal chokehold until he passed out. New York City Police Commissioner Dermot Shea calls the incident disturbing. Former National Security Advisor for President Trump, John Bolton, tells ABC News in an exclusive interview that the president consistently put his re-election prospects ahead of the U.S. national interest. Bolton says the failed negotiations with North Korea only made things much worse for the U.S.
The threat from North Korea today is absolutely greater because while all these photo opportunities were taking place, there's absolutely no doubt that North Korea's work on both its nuclear and ballistic missile programs continued.
President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, says this is Bolton's pattern of behavior.
When he worked in the Bush administration, he pushed and pushed for this Dr. Strangelove agenda. And when he didn't get his way, he left the administration. What did he do? He wrote a tell-all book.
The White House dismisses Bolton's claims. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. Coming up on 6:10 Wall Street, time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashower.
Good morning, John Tucker. Forget the golf for the Belmont. The big story of the weekend, the number of athletes who tested positive for the virus. Nick Watney playing the PGA event at Hilton Head. Tested negative on Tuesday, but positive 3 days later. Grigor Dimitrov, a top 20 tennis player who was playing a Novak Djokovic-led event in Croatia that took no COVID-related precautions. 40 baseball players and officials at team facilities in Florida and Arizona, including 4 Yankees officials in Tampa. 11 NHL players, including Toronto's young star Austin Matthews. 23 Clemson football players. 30 more from LSU were quarantined due to COVID concerns, all leading to the same question: should sports be played? They did finish the Heritage Golf despite a lengthy rain delay. American Webb Simpson shot 64, finished 22 under par and won by 1 shot. They did not race at Talladega due to rain. They will today. For the first time, 5,000 fans will be let in. Some showed up yesterday before the postponement, and the Confederate flag, just banned by NASCAR, was seen even in a flyover. Even worse came word that a noose was found in the garage of NASCAR's only African-American driver, Bubba Wallace, who called the incident despicable. NASCAR said it can't state strongly enough how serious it takes this heinous act. Still no resolution of the baseball labor dispute. The owners not budging off playing 60 games. Players wanted 70. The union vote that was to take place yesterday was postponed after Commissioner Rob Manfred made some tweaks favoring the players in 2021 in case there was a further stoppage this year due to the virus, but Manfred stressed the importance of something definitive done soon. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. And now our weekly look at what would have been in the world of sports if not for the coronavirus pandemic. A college basketball champion would have been crowned with a best baseball champion would have been crowned with a best of 3 series in Omaha, Nebraska. Also, the NBA draft that was scheduled for Thursday night in Brooklyn, and that has now been pushed back to October. And can't forget hockey on the ice. NHL draft would have been Friday and Saturday in Montreal. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset manager.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Asset Management joining us now from Wellington. Hasn't it baffled you that, you've seen these rallies, sometimes at all-time highs for these equity markets, at the same time that we've got a global pandemic, got civil unrest, mass unemployment, a recession, some would argue even a depression here. Hasn't it left you scratching your head?
I think it's both a head scratcher and then there's some underlying trends that do explain a bit of what's gone on. If you look at the real, move in the markets we had several weeks ago and how most large global institutions came into that market, really many had raised cash at the end of last year. There were expectations of a recession, although certainly not for this reason. And so many people were conservatively positioned. When you got a really extreme decline in the markets, therefore, they saw an opportunity and they looked back at their experience in 08-09 and said, I see it again. I would like to buy equities, just straight out, increase my position, use some of the cash, not all of it. As we continue to see the rally extend and we see these fits and starts, you have a lot more participants than in those early days. We expect more volatility, so I wouldn't go all eggs in one basket, but those are some of the reasonings.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. Moody's is withdrawing its corporate family rating, probability of default rating, and instrument rating on bonds for Wirecard. The German payments processor is fighting for survival after acknowledging more than $2 billion it had reported as assets probably don't exist. Wirecard says it's in discussions with creditors and considering a full-scale restructuring after pulling its financial results for fiscal 2019 and the first quarter of this year. Wirecard shares are down 36% in Frankfurt. As for U.S. futures, they are moving higher. S&P futures up 25 points, Dow futures up 191, NASDAQ futures higher by 85 points. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 0.68%, 2-year Treasury yield 0.18%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy?
Nathan, coronavirus cases are on the rise in California, Florida, and Arizona. The numbers are going down in New York, and New York City enters phase 2 of reopening today, including outdoor dining, salon services, and reopened playgrounds with restrictions. A New York City police officer is suspended without pay after he was recorded using a chokehold on a man until he passed out. Police Commissioner Dermot Shea says an investigation is underway, and NASCAR is investigating who placed a noose in the garage stall of Bubba Wallace, NASCAR's only black driver. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. John.
Amy, thanks. 6:19 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. Joining us now, our next guest, Mike Wilson, the Chief U.S. Equity Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Mike, good morning to you. Thanks for being with us this Monday morning, where we have futures firmly in the green. When central banks are all in a market, does an investor just jump on board and enjoy the ride?
Well, it sure feels like that. We've been doing this now, it seems like, for the last 10 years. Central banks have been extremely generous with policy, and that has clearly helped valuations. It's helped keep interest rates low, and so the general belief is that if they're printing money or being stimulative, nothing else matters. But our feeling is a bit different. I mean, clearly that's a big positive, but you also have to remember we have a recovery from a recession going on as well. And I think it's, quite frankly, it's a recovery that's hard to embrace because of the health crisis nature of what we're going through, the very scary, uncertain future from this virus. But that's normal, right? I mean, you go into a recession, there's always something kind of scary going on economically. And that creates a very, good wall of worry. So you have very, stimulative policy, both on the monetary and fiscal side, and that's also a change. We have fiscal now as well. in conjunction with what looks like to be a recovery from recession. And that's a decent, I mean, it's a very good cocktail typically for risk assets. And that's the main reason why we're seeing the action in the stock market. Stock market's seeing that recovery in front of it.
Does the data that we have seen, whether the higher frequency data, support a particular letter for this recession recovery?
Yeah, well, I mean the alphabet soup, if you will. We've called it a V. I think most people disagree with that a few months ago. I think people are coming around to that idea that it could be a V. I think the bigger debate now is around the sustainability of the recovery, because a V is a W if it comes, if you have a downdraft on the other side.
Two V's next to each other is a W.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't know. I mean, nobody knows the future. But right now, we like the shape of the trajectory of the recovery so far. The data, as you point out, has been supportive of that. And the question now for investors, John, is that can we sustain this into 2021, or is it just going to fall on its face? Our view is that it will be sustainable into 21, not at this pace, of course, but that this is a real recovery off of a recession.
Well, what kind of valuations does this all sustain?
Well, we're expensive right now because obviously earnings have been cut significantly during the recession, and that's normal, right? You get kind of peak multiples on trough earnings. So from here, valuations are likely to come back down, but that'll be offset by earnings that'll actually recover probably more than people are expecting. So in round numbers, I would say valuations are 5 to 10% too high, but forward earnings estimates probably have 20% upside over the next year.
All right. We're not going to get any help from the next earnings season, right?
Well, the only thing I would say is that it turns out that the second quarter now economically is probably going to be better than feared a month ago, including relative to our own expectations as the economy reopened and the stimulus really got into the economy more quickly perhaps than some people were thinking. So I think where the second quarter is going to tell us is going to definitively tell us the worst is behind us. Many companies may have lowered the bar too much, and those are companies that are more economically geared, and that's why we've been trying to skew our portfolios towards those companies that are more economically sensitive.
Such as?
Well, in the material space, in the financials area for sure, industrials, some of the more cyclical parts of the technology space. I mean, those are the areas that should see the operating leverage as the economy recovers, and perhaps where the estimates were cut too far.
What other things are you going to be looking for to see that the sustainability continues with the lift that we've got in the stocks?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to, at this point, it's going to be more about what's going on in the economy and sort of the anecdotal, like what's going on from an activity standpoint. I'll give you three things that I'm focused on that kind of need to happen over the next several months. The first thing is I think we need to see schools reopen, so you move into that phase 4 part of the recovery phase in terms of how we manage the recovery from the pandemic. So schools reopening, I think travel and air flights in general, perhaps domestically first. We're seeing some of that come back now, but that probably needs to sustain because it shows a confidence in the system that people are willing to get back out there and travel again. And then I think sports, getting people having sports activity sort of resume. And that sounds kind of trivial, of course, in this kind of an environment, but it's a big part of the American culture. I don't know if we're going to have fans right away, but you need to see progress, and those are sort of three activities that need to kind of make progress, and that'll give us confidence that we're getting back towards normal.
All right, Mike, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Mike Wilson, the Chief U.S. Equity Strategist, Morgan Stanley, joining us this morning. This on a day when futures point to higher open, the cash open on Wall Street this morning. The Dow futures right now, they are up 190 points. That's a rise of 0.75%, pairing some of the earlier gains that we saw. S&P futures right now up 24 points. That's up 0.8%. And the tech-heavy NASDAQ and NASDAQ E-mini futures right now at 80 points higher. That is up 0.8%. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Futures point to gains at the open to start the new week on Wall Street. Stocks closed lower on Friday with the Dow losing almost 1%. We have a look at the housing market ahead today with the May report on existing home sales expected to show a big improvement from April, but still a decline. Investors remain cautious, watching for any signs of setbacks as governments gradually ease coronavirus lockdowns and travel restrictions. Overseas European markets are slightly higher. Asian markets fell today, and NYMEX crude oil is at $39.54 a barrel. American Airlines is moving to shore up its balance sheet with $3.5 billion in new financing, moving away from a reliance on federal aid as the coronavirus pandemic suppresses travel demand. Part of the money will come through the sale of stock. Southwest and United have also offered shares amid the crisis. The largest U.S. carriers continue to burn through as much as $45 million daily as demand sags. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite Advisory.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Listen. That's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.